I'm going to just go ahead and send Heather an invite. Hey, Justin, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Hi, Jamie. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Did you guys make it back safely?
Yeah, we did.
Did they go to the Henry Ford Museum?
Yeah, we did. That's a cool place.
Or did you do the Greenfield Village, the outdoor sort of walking tour of that sort of facility?
Yeah,
Or did you just stay in the museum?
we did. So we didn't know Thomas the Train was in town on Saturday. So we had to do that.
Of course you did. And you
And then we
loved it.
stayed Sunday to do the museum. So we fit it all in.
I don't think I left you much time for any of that though, because the reviews actually they ran tight, and that's the first time that's ever happened. So um, I guess you had half a day,
Yeah, we
right?
got it in. Yep.
Good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Heather's here. Heather, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here and just finishing up food, so I didn't want you all watching me eat.
Ah, it's never stopped me from teaching a class, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Um, okay, well, congratulations. You're basically all done, right? I mean, I don't think that there's any sort of yellow flags. I don't think anybody needs to do anything in addition to what you presented on Saturday, and I think that's always good. It's not always the case, but it is, I think, in this case. I think to use two words, rock solid, is the way I would describe the event on Saturday morning, and I appreciated the hard work that you all put into it between when I last saw you kind of officially and when you presented yesterday or Saturday. So congratulations, right? Congratulations on finishing the 2 studios in the advanced design sequence on top of um, the Philips studio over the summer, the critical practice studio. I hope you took a little bit of a break between um, Saturday and the pencils down break. You do have, I think, maybe a week between now and when classes start. I don't actually remember when classes start. Do they start on the 15th or something like that? That sound about right?
Yeah, I got
Yeah.
an email from my practice portfolio instructor. It starts his first class is Tuesday the 17th. So
Who do you have?
fellow Maltese,
Oh,
John
I don't.
Abella. So
Yeah, yeah, that's right. He said you're Maltese. I
that's
forgot
what he
about
said.
that. Yeah, he said that to me on Friday when I sat in the review in his reviews on Friday.
All right,
So that explains a lot about you, Brandon,
easy A. All right.
or not.
Yeah, or not, maybe. Who knows?
Well, good. So definitely try to take advantage of that time and this week as well to pull your thoughts together and begin preparing how you can to get acclimated for the sort of expectations of practice portfolio for the summer. I might encourage you to look at some of the items in our library from the previous graduates to get a sense of what they've done to prepare you. Some of that stuff can be found online as well. Many of the former students, all of the former students in our practice portfolio sequence have their portfolios online. So if you can think of a student, you could do a Google search on them and you'll find that there. So like Eric Wingelar, for example, you could search him out and see his portfolio. I've got a whole list, but since I'm not teaching it, I'll let your next professor share that because they may think that that's not, or they may think that's a good idea or not. If you'd like it, just ask me for it. So now let's hear from all of you in sort of a general way about this class, maybe to help me fine-tune the sort of quality of the class for next year. I will confess that I felt like the challenge I sensed going into an online version of the Missing Middle Class was pretty well put to the side of the road. I didn't feel like the distance between, you know, Cleveland and Detroit, London and Detroit, Windsor and Detroit, Columbus and Detroit proved to be very much of a problem. I felt like all of you tried to learn as much as you can about an authentic appreciation of Detroit and the North End neighborhood as it was possible. Yet I do think that when this class or a version of this class is taught on campus, the ability of the students to go back to the site and see things in reality and maybe meet people and talk to people and get to know the context from a kind of cultural or social way is helpful, maybe more helpful than in this sort of online way. So I think that's something I would try to overcome if I teach this class again as an online section. So I'm just sort of preempting you in that regard. But I'm wondering if you sort of noticed some other challenges that we maybe didn't really confront, or that we avoided, or that we could have fixed. You know, and if you would tell me what that is, I'd be happy to integrate that into next fall. So I'll open it up for a general discussion. How would I improve this class?
My thought, when I was thinking about over the drive home, probably the only thing that I would have taken a little bit more away, and I was very lucky during some of my crit reviews, Jamie was usually consistently, or was consistently there. Heather would be, depending on who tailed in, but it would be really, I think, helpful, especially considering we're not all sitting in a room together and being able to, you miss that sort of camaraderie where you get to look over someone's shoulder and sort of see what they do, or they can just give you that little bit of input. Whereas I really appreciated how you allowed us to be adults and choose whether or not we wanted to stay on or come and join a session and leave when we wanted to and stuff like this. But I do think there's, whether it's you team up or it rotates where at least one person sort of sits over the review as well and allows some extra input, might be a little bit more.
That's very interesting. So, you know, I did make it explicitly sort of open to you all this semester, largely because I sensed that, like I said, the idea of studying a certain neighborhood here, if you lived in Cleveland, was going to be problematic. So I thought that the ability to sort of audit each other's conversations would be more helpful. So I didn't discourage that. In semesters prior, I always said you need to ask permission to sit in on things, and I didn't really make that much of a deal about that this term for this reason. In other words, Catherine, all of the classes before 2015-16, each student selected their own site in their own city. So you would have studied Cleveland, for example. Heather would have studied London. Jamie would have studied Columbus, right? And so it didn't, I mean, you were teaching us as much as anything in that regard. So the idea of sharing information about what you knew about the city was maybe more, you would have to rely on more people to learn about Detroit, for instance. And so, but I love the idea of pairing. I think that could work out very well, especially if we have like a nice number, like 6 or 8 students, in the semester. So I'll definitely encourage that. Anyone else want to weigh in on that thought or other thoughts to improve?
The only suggestion I have was the space where the final crit happened. It was
That
kind
was
of
the
difficult.
first time I'd ever seen that space, by the way.
Yeah,
Friday.
I thought it was going to be like I like the format like of having the two screens for
Yeah.
anybody online, but it was really tough to see anything like just because it's a long conference or long boardroom like table, like so anything that's just closer to the screen or even a projector or a larger space, because it was kind of tough to see other people's presentation. Like I did the best I could just downloading people's presentation before, but watching it or seeing it firsthand, it's tough unless maybe you're at the front of the table, you know what I mean, to kind of see what was going on the screen anyways. Like obviously you heard what they had to say perfectly fine, but just their visuals were tough to read because it's so far away, right? For me anyways, I was at the end of the table. So
Yeah, me too. I was even more remote, and I was only looking at the screen. I wasn't looking at the downloaded version, for example, because my computer was up front. So what's going to happen next year? Just so you know, that single screen with that big shoebox of a speaker is coming down, and it's going to be replaced by two even larger screens mounted side by side, like this and this, with a sound bar underneath them, so that we don't need a monitor on a set of casters next time, and the camera will be mounted where the shoebox speaker was, and that will be more inclusive for the room. I think the other thing I learned is that John Abella, you were the one, Brandon, that asked about format or drawing size or something like that.
Yep.
And John requires a lot of things in his studio. He gives them the site plan, he gives them the program, he gives them the areas, and I kind of wince when I see that, but that's the way he likes to teach, so I'm not going to upset that cart. But he does suggest that everything that gets presented in a review and in our Hangouts be on a 16:9 aspect ratio paper size, so that you would save all of your work to that size, so that when you shared it, you can not only share the screen, you can share your desktop, and that allows the image to be even larger when we're talking this way.
Yeah.
So I learned something new, and I told John that. I teased him for not telling me that sooner, and so that's another requirement that is a requirement that I'm going to enforce. But honestly, Brandon, that room was not finished, but I think that it did well for what we had. I think it was a little crowded. I didn't realize it was going to be that small, but when I sat in on John's reviews, I kind of thought, oh my goodness, we're going to be cozy in this room, on Saturday, and indeed we were. But I did like the energy in the room. So maybe at one moment you sacrifice visibility for energy and fraternity, maybe. But point well taken. Hopefully the larger screens and maybe getting everyone to do a 16:9 sort of aspect ratio on their drawings and their drawing formats will help.
Sure.
Also, I think that they're going to want me in the DCDT building next year for both my online studio and for final reviews in let me say it this way, for my on-campus studio next fall and for the online studio next spring. I think the reviews will be downtown. I don't know what that space is going to be like either. Anything else?
I guess this is more just positive feedback, but I really liked how Betsy and Christoph were able to sit in both our midterm and our final.
Good, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Right, because they understood our project already and they were familiar with it, so they were able to see that development at the very end. So
yeah, and I think in every case they were pretty. I mean, first of all, thanks for saying that. I like critic continuity, and because I know it's useful for me. Because if there's a student that's struggling and I need some advice, I can go to that critic because they've seen the work and they see maybe the merit of the work or the improvement in the work that maybe because I'm boiling over, I can't see it, right? So they can call me off the ledge for one thing, but also for you because it helps you feel like you have a friend in the audience, right? You know a couple of people that are assessing you, but at the same time you've developed a rapport with them, and also because you never know what's going to happen in the future, right? You may find yourself in a conversation in a year or two where they're at an interview table, right? And you're gonna enjoy that comfort factor sitting there with them, or you may need some advice, and so all you have to do is say, "Hey, Mark, what was that guy, Christoph? Can you give me his email? I have a question about my career or whatever." You all should feel comfortable, right, in inviting them to reconnect and stay in touch with your own career development. So I think that's one of the other sort of tacit reasons why I bring in so many critics, so that you develop a professional rapport with individuals that maybe aren't necessarily involved in the university or in our teaching program, but are friends of the university and therefore, friends of yours. So take that for what it's worth, right? They can be of assistance to you. Anyone else? Vanessa, did your mom enjoy it?
She actually did. She likes seeing what I spend all my time on, and then she liked watching everybody else's presentations too. She kept commenting to me while everyone was presenting and talking about the project, so it was interesting to see an outsider's perspective, not in the world of architecture. So yeah, she liked it.
Well, I'm sure she liked your project best, but whose project did she like the best? I'm putting you on the spot.
I know. I'm trying to remember what she said. We talked a lot about miscellaneous things.
Well, if you don't want to tell us now, make sure that you send them a note.
I don't think she had a favorite.
Okay.
She's more conservative, so for her, she said she wouldn't want to live in any of our houses. No offense to all of them.
That says a lot, right? That says a lot.
Yeah. But, she's the baby boomer generation, and she lives in Brighton, in the suburbs, so...
No, that's not the suburbs, that's the country.
Yeah. So, it didn't surprise me much, I just kind of laughed.
Good. Well, I'm glad that she got to do that, and I actually think it's a wonderful thing that you're able to do that. It never occurred to me to bring my parents to a review, at school, and I've seen that more and more now, not so much at Lawrence, but like at UDM, where there's a real strong sense of family and community there. So that it happened at Lawrence, I think, is really pretty cool. So thanks for bringing her in. I interrupted somebody. I don't know who it was.
That was me.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I thought, overall, I thought the semester was really good. I felt like you really kind of helped us to develop our ideas, which was good, and listen, but yet also gave us different stuff to look at every week, which I know some of my profs in the past didn't really there'd be weeks where all of a sudden they have all this stuff for us to look at, but then weeks when it'd be okay, see you, and it'd be okay, well, what do I do now? So you were really good about doing that, and then I also really appreciated having the critics come back and be consistent in more than one review, because it creates some relationship there.
Right.
The one thing that I felt like sometimes with the final review, I know we were on really tight time, but I felt like with some people's projects, the discussions were kind of just really kicking off, and then it was we're on such a tight schedule that we need to cut it off. So like I felt like that was kind of unfortunate at some points because I thought the conversation was starting to go somewhere really cool, and then we were like, oh well.
The duck.
Yeah. So I don't know, like if maybe that's like something can be negotiated for future reviews, like maybe have an hour buffer or something where you can allow for those little pocket conversations to go a little bit longer along the way. But yeah.
Well, so now that is a topic that we talk about every year. And I'm kind of at a loss to sort of figure out what to do about that, to be honest. I've had critics that, and you saw it this Saturday, that can't get there till they can get there.
Mhm.
And I've had critics that have to leave right at 12 o'clock or something like that because they have a life, right?
Right.
I think that that's life, and that's what that's what happens, and that's frustrating. And at the same time, it's kind of hard to ask them to stay, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 50 minutes, 60 minutes longer just because things are getting good.
Right.
But I will admit that things seemed like they were really getting interesting when that goddamn duck started to quack. And I sensed that about 3 times,
Yeah.
which was pretty cool, actually. It is unfortunate that it has to end that way. So I don't know what to do. I'll keep thinking about it. I think that what happens when you have 7 students is that you get a pretty reasonable amount of time to
Right,
go
yeah.
through things. And in every case, I think the reviews themselves went about 5 minutes longer after the duck quacked, for the most part. Maybe about two times we heard the duck quack and then we moved on. And I think that, if I had 6 students, right, I would take that time slot and I'd afford all of you more time, probably by like 5 minutes, right, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in the context of, ordering a pizza, it's ordering a small pizza with 12 slices or ordering a small pizza with 10 slices. It's still the same pizza. It's just, how many, how big are the slices going to be, right? So that's the number of students. When I had the class in in the fall of 2014, I had 11 students, and those reviews were 16 minutes total. So they had 7 minutes to present and 16 minutes in total. So those were pretty grim. Those were really like forced and difficult, and made even more complicated by the number of critics that I have. I think this time we had a pretty good sweet spot. Martin generally holds onto the microphone a long time when he's talking. And I mean that with all respect and love. He was my best man after all. But I feel like he kind of like acknowledged somehow that there was a lot to be said, and I think he shared that. I also think that like Samantha had kind of a nervous energy about her and spoke a lot for all of you, and I thought that was good. And I thought that Ryan, who I forgot to mention was going to be there, but I think I wrote earlier that he was going to be there. Ryan didn't seem to say a lot, but he maintained a kind of consistent position about the inclusion of the people of that neighborhood, and where are they, and what are you doing about them, and how are you integrating the sort of local constituents without, and designing for them. So I felt like, even though he said little, by comparison to Sammy, I felt like what he said was still spot on and still important. So I think at the end of it all, you guys had a pretty good scenario, but I sensed about 3 times that the conversation could have gone on, and it's unfortunate that we can't take advantage of that, but maybe maybe I'll figure out a way to do that. If you can think of one, Heather, let me know.
Okay.
Anyone else? Jamie? Michael?
It's just tough to do that, I would think, because it's like if some of us were online too and some are in person, it's a lot different sort of dynamic.
Yeah, the fact that you were all there, I think, also helps to stimulate a more discursive kind of critical conversation that is difficult to get that energy going when it's a virtual one.
Right. And I don't know if this ties into what Heather was saying, but like maybe like more intermission periods in between. But again, I know that would kind of like stretch it out. And you probably want to keep it kind of compact. But
how about not showing or having the research presentation?
I don't know. I mean, like the critics that were in our midterm review probably didn't need to see that again. But then you're going to have other critics there, right, that have never seen that before. But then like Jonathan Tate came in late, so he didn't even see that research. Yeah, so I don't know. Or maybe like sending that to them before the review. I don't know.
Actually, I was going to say, I think the sending before would be great because a nice little chunk of my discussion with Jonathan centered around the whole missing middle and I think part of it was because Vanessa just shown one approach. My approach was so very different in trying to find, is there a continuity or is it just out there? So that could do it. Because it also felt rushed. Like I know when we were presenting, I was more pushing to beat that duck call than, was I clear on, what I was delivering at that time. It felt a little more, because 5 minutes was very short to deliver.
I actually like that idea of the research being shared in advance, so I'll take that into account. And perhaps for the on-campus studio, the research could be printed on like 11 by 17s in color, and it could be tacked up on the wall. And then when everybody's eating bagels and drinking coffee, they can maybe stand around and engage in that. And I could also send PDFs of those plates when the invites to the critics go out for a benchmark 2 and a benchmark 3. So because it occurred to me as we were getting into it, I don't know when I wrote it down, but the idea of like, should this research even be part of today's conversation? I don't remember where I wrote that down, but I did, and I'm trying to think that through. So I like that idea. There was another thought I had about that, and well, I'll give it back to Jamie. Did you finish what you were saying?
Well, just for me, like I would have liked that time to have actually like talked to the critics more.
Yeah.
After the presentation or during an intermission, something like that.
Right.
But I was like so intimidated, I think, by the duck call that I finished at like 8 minutes 40 seconds.
No, you finished. You finished just seconds before the duck quacked.
Yeah, I got it in just in time.
You did.
I think I just didn't want to hear the duck. I was like so. So it worked for me.
I think you ought to change the ringtone on your phone to that.
Yeah.
You'll overcome this hang up.
I'd probably never answer my phone.
Probably. It is pretty obnoxious, I agree. Michael, what's on your mind tonight?
I mean, I don't really have any criticisms, which is
cool.
Probably bad because I know you want to hear them and improve.
Well, you can share them with me. That's fine.
No, I mean I don't. personally
You
have
can
it.
share them in writing if it occurs to you. It doesn't
If, yeah,
doesn't have to be this week. It can be this summer. You can say, "Hey, dude, I thought I've been drinking and I'm on my fourth beer, and I want to tell you what I've really been thinking," and then you can send it on.
I'll drunk text you.
As long as I know that you've been drinking, then I'll take it into that context, right?
Yeah.
Or if you say, I'm actually coming to Detroit and I'd love to get a coffee and we can talk about something that's been a bee in my bonnet about this, or I've been thinking about this, then we can do it that way too.
I guess the one thing I would say with the research, you could, I know for our group, the neighborhood and history group, we didn't do any changes from midterm to this, so you could send off the video of the midterm and show them that, and that could work for at least the online classes.
I not just the PDFs, but even the YouTube video. Right. Cool idea. Okay, good. How about the dress rehearsal pinup, where you guys gave your presentations and then you guys graded each other's presentations? Is that a definite must include for next semester?
Yeah, I'd say that is. It really helped to remind you of what you're missing, prepare you for the actual review in front of critics, and then also get feedback from everyone else and see what everyone else is doing, because you haven't seen it in a little while.
That's right. I mean, that's really, for me, that was the strongest thing, and it wasn't until I decided to do that I thought, oh, you know what, I'm going to put y'all in the hot seat to grade each other and see how much you like that. And I was, and I'd be interested to hear what you guys say, but I was struck by how firm you guys are with each other.
Actually, if I can jump in, I was actually frustrated by it a little bit, because I
the dress rehearsal or the grades?
Well, just the whole idea of it. To be honest, I mean, some of it I looked as being, I'm just going to be really blunt, I was a little annoyed thinking, wow, you haven't even sat in on any of my crit sessions to see where I came from. A lot of these are partially developed ideas, so it's a pretty strong stance to take when I guess we could have formalized, but to me it was like, I'm not going to waste a lot of time formalizing out these plates for people who haven't sat in my crit session when it's not my midterm, because there's too much work to be done elsewise. So I found it very helpful because there was a lot of rawness to it, so it's very double-sided for me. There was a lot of raw, just, wow, some people could just point right out something that was just totally missing, and it wasn't that black and white, but just because they hadn't seen it before, so there was a plus and a minus to it. Which again might come back to that sort of partnering thing where,
I was thinking the same thing.
Just because you get that continuity, sort of what we talked about, having a couple of the crits were consistent from midterm to final, sort of doing the same, because there's an evolution to everything that we do. And I think in terms of the evaluation, it's part of that evolution process that somebody sees. I think it's great to have people that haven't or aren't as knowledgeable, because obviously in the field we're going to present a lot of the time to people who have no idea about it. But in terms of us, but that's at the end stage. But in terms of us as developmentally challenging and advancing our project forward, I think there's a lot of extra weight to be added by people that have an idea of where you're coming from, where you're trying to go, to maybe help you figure out how to get there, versus just, oh, this didn't work, or I don't understand, versus they might have a better concept idea. Have they known a better foundation of what you're working on?
I understand. I think the partnering is one way to ameliorate that, so I'm seeing some benefits of that suggestion. Yeah, I can see where it would be read as a double-edged sword, right? So, point well taken. I personally found it to be really helpful in terms of creating more energy in the semester and giving me a chance to sort of watch how you guys saw the work evolving. So for me, that was very helpful. And then just giving you a chance to talk about your work before it was sort of refined, I think was also good for you, in terms of articulating kind of a verbal narrative, whether scripted or not. So I appreciated it. I valued it. What else? So we didn't do a field trip this semester, but I gave more conversations. I led more lectures this semester than ever before, and Heather gave me a ridiculous number of renderings, and then I don't want to say stole. I selectively borrowed renderings and case studies from several projects from our office. I just downloaded them to my drive. And I'm looking, as I'm sort of downloading them, I'm like, oh, I could talk about that. Oh, yeah, I could talk about this. I can connect this to that. So I've got like a shitload of images now that can be developed into new lectures. Let's talk about the merit of those for just a second. Would you have me continue those conversations on Monday nights?
Are you
I
talking
actually
about?
thought it was one of the strengths for those of us that, I mean,
see.
to me, you introduced a lot of new subject matter and topic, and I really thought, especially towards the latter end of the course, you were helping to specifically address particular concepts within our research, which
Right.
means you then again took it upon yourself to go find more stuff.
Right.
I've not had that happen in an online class before.
So doesn't do the other studio professors lecture at all? So who does, Vanessa?
Honor Bond
Mm-hmm.
lectures a lot.
Good.
It's helpful, but sometimes he rambles a bit. But you're better in the amount of information. You both equally got the point across. He just does it in a more long-winded way. But
Well, he has
yeah.
a PhD.
Huh?
He has a PhD.
Which just means he talks more. But yeah, no, Honor Bond lectures a lot. He lectured every week, twice a week.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. That's impressive.
John lectured too, but not to that extent.
Mm-hmm.
But he always framed it, which I thought was really helpful, like his, contextualism, environmentalism.
Yeah, the humanism, environmentalism.
Yeah, so and then everything that he showed kind of related within those categories, which I thought was really nice. Like the way that he kind of structured his lectures was good, and it was helpful to to the tasks that we were doing.
Good.
Over the next couple weeks or whatever. So.
Okay. What else? Anything else? Would you recommend our program to anyone? I mean, it's really kind of a tailor-made thing, right? I mean, if you're not living near campus, if you're living, in Pennsylvania or Ohio or Ontario, right? You can be living anywhere, and you can be in our studio, and you can be working with these really great students and these great professors, right? And you can learn a lot about great architecture, all from the comfort of your own home. And I think that's really been kind of a wonderful thing. And I hope that you found the value in the kind of communion that we've been able to have here, in our own studio. So for me, it's really quite a marvelous thing. I'll share a few observations with you. I think I told you that I've been teaching for 34 years, and that means that I was doing this before CAD, right, and before computers really became kind of the charcoal to drawing as it is today. And the studio experience was, for many people, kind of this very conversational mode. A professor would lead with a brief, and you'd go and design for 10 weeks and then come back for a review, and then the grades would be on a list on the door of her or his office, and then you'd have to figure out why you got a B plus and she got a A minus. And it was a very different environment to teach in. In many ways, it was a lot of fun, and in many ways, it put a lot of burden and responsibility on the student to figure things out for themselves. And I think that over the years, I've enjoyed learning how to be incrementally better. It's taking me obviously a long time to get where I think I need to be, but the idea that I've been able to teach for so long, and as an adjunct, which for me is optimal because I feel like ever since I began teaching in earnest, at least in the graduate level in 2009, I've been able to understand how the work that I do in the office can be applied to and kind of inoculating into what I'm thinking about in studio, and vice versa, and probably no more clear a transaction between students and their work influencing my work, and my work influencing the conversation in our studios, as it has been since I joined Hamilton Anderson, because of the nature of the studio brief with Missing Middle, the sort of renewed interest in Detroit, and my own sort of personal love for the city, and a belief that architecture should actually be for all people, even if those people can't afford architects, and which is another problem, which is another crisis that we talked a little bit about earlier this semester, and it continues to be a concern of mine. And to the extent that we can solve that in a studio, I'm interested to explore that, at least from my perspective, and certainly in the online environment. But teaching has been, I think, a really important sort of aspect of my career and my life, and I've loved every studio. But I have to confess that I've really enjoyed this studio. I feel like the subject matter is really a personal one to me, and it's in such professional alignment. It's so concentric to my own attitudes as they've evolved in the 2 years I've been at Hamilton Anderson, that for me the studio came at the right time and in the right moment, right? The right time in my teaching career, at the right moment in my professional career. And I hope that you all look back on this studio as something that is potentially a tipping point or a starting point for you to cultivate your own pursuits in architecture, whether they're in your own office or in an office that you're hoping to be in a year or two or in 5. Hopefully that you're able to see how much you can do when you work alone and when you can work together, and that research and trying to understand a place and its people or the economy or a culture is a notable and worthwhile thing in the pursuit of better architecture. So hopefully you'll have sort of found value in this process this semester, and hopefully as you begin reflecting on this semester in in your practice portfolio and in the development of your website in 4 to 8 or 10 weeks, you'll take stock of this term and look back on it as fondly as I do, but also this very important 1.5 or 2 years in your own career as a maturing graduate student and as an architect. I love teaching a great deal, and it's something that I can't believe I was given the opportunity to begin doing when I was your age, and yet at the same time I'm glad that those adults in the room were a little crazy to even bring me in at the sort of the maturity level that I was at when I began teaching when I was 25. I wouldn't be teaching today, quite honestly, if I hadn't had those people making that decision back then, and I don't think I would be the effective teacher that you suggest that I am if I hadn't been teaching for as long as I have. But at the same time, I feel like the profession has changed a lot in those 35 years. I feel like there were clearly several years in a row, maybe even a whole decade, where the profession of architecture was a manageable. There was a manageable outcome. That the profession of architecture would be one where the phone would constantly ring, work would come in, firms would get those opportunities. There would be enough opportunities because of the economy for all of the firms to get, their fair shake, and we'd all be sort of designing and drawing and putting them together and making sort of slow progress in the sort of culture of architecture. And then the whole world sort of changed, didn't it, in 2009 and 2008, and it really changed in a lot of ways, and I regret that it was so hard on so many of us at that point, but I'm also really glad that it happened, because it caused me to really kind of focus on what teaching should be about and what our obligations as faculty members are in terms of preparing you for a real sort of role in our profession. When I began teaching in 2009 at the graduate program at UDM, that class who graduated in 2010 entered into arguably the worst economic period that architects had ever seen, ever. And there were 4 faculty members at UDM, and I was the only faculty member that was working in an office at the time. The rest of them were sort of either core faculty members who were, full-time professors and not needing to work or do practice. And then one faculty member was an erstwhile sort of practitioner, kitchens and house additions and things like that, but even she was struggling, and quite honestly, she was only making money teaching as an adjunct. So I think that what I found that year was that I got to know 32 students, and many of them realizing my sort of position in Soroki's office and my sort of role as a faculty member at Lawrence and as well as at UDM, began to sort of tap into my sort of Rolodex, and when they asked for help, they got it, and they all got positions if they asked for it. And so anyone that came to me, including my own students, that asked for my help in 2010 landed. They all got absorbed. They maybe didn't get absorbed in the firm that they were looking for, but they got jobs through some sort of assistance. And it was really after that had happened that I kind of thought that, that's actually something I can do, and I don't have to be a PhD to do that. I don't have to be the world's best designer, the world's best lecturer, the world's best theoretician or even critic. But I can do what I can do, which is empower you or connect you to our community of architects. So I say this to you now to remind you of what I said at the beginning of the semester, which is that if you ever need that assistance or that advice, I'm happy to afford that to you. So it doesn't have to be now. It doesn't even have to be next year. It could be in 5 years. I feel like the kinds of conversations that we've had individually and as a group in this studio mean that really right now we're sort of on par with one another. I feel like we're all peers, and I don't feel like that will ever change now. So, consider me your friend, consider me your colleague, and consider me as a resource for whatever sort of impasses or concerns that you have as your career unfolds. And I will do whatever I can to assist you, because that's really what I think a faculty member should be doing. I think that it's erroneous to think that you're this empty vessel with nothing in it, right? And that my job is to fill your empty brain up with what I know. I mean, that's just a total fallacy. But honestly, people, that's what teaching was about 35 years ago. We kind of like opened your lid and then poured in what we knew you needed, and it just sort of filled up the tank, and we closed the lid, screwed the top back on, and kicked you out. And that was what architecture school was. And if you rejected what we knew, or if you argued with, our sensibility, then we found a way to move past you. I mean, it was a very cruel and in some ways unfortunate scenario, and I saw that happen a lot, particularly at Cincinnati. But not everybody is cut out to be, a designer. Not everybody is going to be a principal in their own firm. There's so many roles that you can play in an office. There's so many roles you can play in architecture that's not even in an office. And I hope that that with your education here at Lawrence and your experience here as a graduate student, that you have the tools and the confidence to believe in yourself and that you can do whatever you set out to do. But if you ever need help along the way, I'm open to helping you. I also hope that you grow to discover that the craft that you're involved with, the craft of architecture, is really a very special one. It's one that you can actually love doing. And I hope that for you, you find a place that allows you to grow as an architect in a place that you love to grow, right? That supports that fondness, that supports that appreciation, and that supports whatever else comes your way. You may find, for instance, that you want to become more active in AIA and the leadership of the American Institute of Architects, and I hope the firm you're with gives you that flexibility. Or if you find that you want to do research or community service, that your firm encourages you to do that, because it's ultimately good for them if they support you in that. Or if you want to teach on your own, I would love that if any of you discovered that you are interested in that and want to get involved in that. It's pretty simple. If I can do it, anybody can do it. So if that becomes something that you're interested in, I can help facilitate that as well. I think any of you would be an excellent faculty member, because each of you have a passion and an energy and an ability to communicate that is actually much better than my own, and that's what it takes, really, I think, to be an effective teacher. Not only loving what you do, but believing in what you do and loving to share that and learn from the people that you're sharing it with. I think that's the most important thing. So I wish you all well as you embark on your summer. It's not going to be an easy one, but I know that you're going to feel rewarded after you finish in July, and I hope that the process for Practice Portfolio is a smooth and successful one. And I wish you the very best of luck as you embark on the next part of your journey. It's a long one. I've been involved in architecture since I can't even remember how far back, but I have to tell you, it keeps getting better and better, and it does because I get the chance to meet very special people like each of you. So thank you. Okay.
I got a
Go ahead, Brandon.
I have a statement and a question. First,
yes, sir.
The question is, you said at the beginning of the class that we would be able to, that if we could look at previous portfolios from classes, anybody that's ever graduated Lawrence Tech. How do we do that?
You go to the library.
Is it available online, or is it at?
I don't know. I imagine that the portfolios are analog. They're bound books in the library.
Oh, okay.
But I have a list of websites that I could share with you if I could find that email. It continues to grow. I don't know how active those sites are, but you could look at their websites.
Okay. Yeah, if you could find that, that would be awesome. I'd like to take a look.
But I mean, you could say, Eric Wingelar, Shannon McElmurray, any of those good Canadian kids.
I actually really want to see Eric Winglar, as I'm really good friends with his brother Corey. So.
And or Terry Douglas, or Jeff Lasowski. Those they have all of that stuff done. So
Okay.
you could contact them and see their portfolios.
Okay. And second, I just wanted to make a statement because I took this studio specifically because the entire program of grad school, not that this is a bad thing, it was kind of interesting at the beginning, and then it kind of gets redundant. I find that grad school, every project I did was kind of like sci-fi and not really tangible. My first class, critical practice, I designed a hippopotamus with fucking leaves that came out of its body. So that's not really architecture. It was cool, like don't get me wrong, it was awesome as like a design concept. So that was neat.
Could
And then
could it knit or play the drums
it
too, or
cured
was it
Ebola
just
by eating bat crap. I'm not kidding. I'm actually telling the truth. So that's what that was my critical practice.
I'm actually speechless for a change.
Yeah, it was pretty strange. So it was fun, but it wasn't really what I had envisioned my master's of architecture to be like.
Right.
And then my second, my first ADS one, but my second studio in grad school, I designed lattice structures that would grow like hops and wine vines for urban vegetation. Like this is like, it was not as far of a stretch as hippopotamus with leaves attached to it to cure Ebola, but it was still like this was a really far stretch from like the realm of reality. So this project, as kind of maybe bland as it sounded compared to the previous studios, is at least something that I had envisioned my graduate school to be like. So I really appreciate that. As I don't know, I thought my entire our studio classes were going to be similar to this one, but maybe focusing on different aspects of development or architecture, but it actually had nothing. It was nothing like I envisioned, which was good. Like it kind of rounds. It makes you well-rounded, I guess I should say. But this was very refreshing to take a class that
had that alignment. Yeah. So I kind of wish that I had the the stones to teach a class that taught you about hippopotamus structure and bat iguana or whatever that stuff's called, right? That's very cool. I mean, there was a time actually when that was pretty popular stuff. It's kind of interesting that that's still going on today. I think if you go to like U of M reviews like last week, you would still see that kind of territory being explored. My own interests, though, in terms of history and theory, are probably something that I kind of push to the side. I don't really lecture on this history and theory very much anymore because I don't know that it's that relevant in terms of practice. But I think the wonderful thing about our profession is that there's room for that stuff, as long as it's maybe taken in the context of what you're meant to do. I don't know that I don't know that I could teach a class like that, or if I'd even be interested in it. But I love that we have that stuff. It's not my cup of tea, but that's why we have so many faculty members, and that's why we have so many students, because you have choice. Maybe you didn't have a choice to take the hippopotamus studio, but you had a choice to take this one. But it's pretty cool, that you had that opportunity. I don't know that I would show that project in your interview, but unless the drawings were really good. I don't think Victor Soroki would appreciate that project.
I was just thinking, like, I was in critical practice too with Brandon, and my group designed a spider fungus morph. And I was just thinking, if I had put that in my portfolio and Victor was flipping through my portfolio and saw it, I don't even know how he would have reacted. So I was kind of laughing to myself as soon as you said that too. It's so funny.
I have the other side though, because I was also in the critical practice, but we did a giant crab with other species mixed in. It was wacky, and but that's actually what got me the job, because the renderings we did for that and the crazy things we did for that. The guy loved it and was like, "Oh, it's so outside of the box." So that got me hired. So you could have both ends.
That's right. See, there's room, right?
Those were great drawings too, by the way.
Yeah, those.
Your group had great drawings. Yeah, the drawings were great.
Yeah. So if nothing else, right?
I actually had like the opposite reaction that Brandon has. Like that studio like changed it. It was so great for me. It was so great because like I went to, well, I'm not going to name other colleges, but certain colleges that are very theory heavy, right?
Sure.
And like the thing I love the most about LTU is that it's theory and practice. So
Right.
like with that summer studio with Terraform One, it's like none of us, I don't think, expected that. But it's like you like I didn't expect that at all. But I came in and it's like, okay, I'm gonna like go off the cliff with like
A whole bunch of friends.
or precedence, right? Like or program. Like I don't even know what this thing is. It's like a hummingbird, whatever was our thing. But then it's like, but then you realize at the end, like it could potentially have a practical application that could have some sort of use, and that like totally blew my mind. Like this thing that's totally crazy. Could actually like be made and actually have a use or a purpose.
And we would want someone like an architect to be able to think critically in that capacity for that role.
Right. So for me it was, I don't know, for me it was great. It was a great experience. I really loved it.
See, that's cool.
Yeah.
But Brandon, I'm glad that at least when dessert came in this meal called graduate school, it was tiramisu, and that's what you wanted before or after anything else. We got what you ordered or would want it on the menu.
I don't want to make it sound like I wasn't enjoying critical practice studio. I actually had it was one of my favorite classes in grad school, but it was not it's not about whether I enjoyed it or not, or whether or not it opened my mind. It was about, it wasn't definitely, obviously, I don't think anybody was expecting that class to be what it was, but I was glad that I got a class like this because if I would have, because I was telling my dad, actually, my dad is like almost 70 years old, and he knows like just about nothing about architecture. So I was telling my dad like a few weeks ago, we went for lunch, and I was explaining to him like some of these projects, and if I hadn't taken this class, he would have thought I hadn't taken architecture as my master program, right? So because I would have designed a hippopotamus with lily pads, I would have designed a lattice that grows stuff downtown to prevent heat island, and then whatever other class I would have taken other than this one, you know what I mean? It doesn't. Like I get it. It's like, you know what I mean? It's out there, and that's what grad school is all about. But to explain it to like my grandparents or my dad, they just wouldn't understand, right? So I'm glad at least I could showcase maybe some of the renders I did in this class and say, yeah, look at architecture, not a hippo with leaves coming off the side of it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a very interesting anecdote. I'll never forget that conversation. Anyone else? Okay, so Jamie, were you the last presenter?
Yes.
Okay, so you get to go first tonight. If you guys would just be kind of off to the side, I'll move through each of you as the night progresses. So, Justin, you were the first presenter, so you'll be here last, okay? So you can probably go watch Wheel of Fortune right now. All right, cool. Okay, let's see. Jamie, how did you feel about your presentation?
Yeah, good. I just want to say thanks for what you said. That was really nice. And I appreciate your teaching style. It's
I'm not sure what it is, but
well, like you said, exploration. and giving the student a chance to explore, and then sort of like guiding them in that exploration. And that's why I love that summer studio too, because it was about exploration.
Right.
You know, and I think that's very critical in teaching. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I mean, I really loved your project, and I loved I actually really appreciated having you and Catherine in the studio. I've spoken to you both about that before, having a mature and what do they call you guys? The there's like a term for you guys, like the non-conventional student or something like that. Anyways, whatever the term, I know I should know these things, but I don't.
Just don't say old.
I'm not, and believe me, I'm older than you, as you saw, but I definitely appreciate the possibility that even in graduate school today, where since it's a required degree, the majority of the students that we get in this program are right out of the undergraduate degree, where they've not had any opportunity to do something other than school, and they can come in and they have a little bit of experience in our profession. Maybe they've had a couple of jobs, maybe they've gotten married and have kids, right? Maybe a decade or two has gone by in the profession, and maybe they kind of have this new sense of who they want to be and the courage to do what you've done, what Catherine has done. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate I appreciate that courage, and I appreciate the sort of intensity of focus that you both brought into the studio. So thank you for that. Let's see. I also hope for you that this, you put up a couple of plates that are still really kind of hard for me to ignore. That affordable housing is really in a state of a desperate need. That I hope is still kind of like, I hope that's resonating in your own heart. I hope that and that you maybe do something about that. I also hope that your interest in constructability is something you continue with. And the idea of maybe being concerned with I guess how would I say this? The accessible, affordable, maybe even homes for user groups that are not conventional, to look out for those that maybe are not being looked out for. And I think that you would bring, Jamie, I think, a real sense of gravitas to architecture if you continue to pursue those interests. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think that someone with your experience, right, and newfound sort of concern in this regard, that architecture would really benefit if you were to continue in this line of thought. Your project changed a lot over the semester too. Your research changed a lot, and I feel like for the presentation on Saturday, there was a lot that we left on the bench, and a lot that came out onto the field, sports metaphor. And I felt like, a lot of people might have been frustrated by that if they had invested the time to do that research and document, that they would force that research into their final presentation. And you didn't seem to have any problem like benching it. And I think that comes from your own experience and understanding what's relevant and how to stay on point, even if the point had to be adjusted or refined, or even if it had to be sort of recast. So I appreciated the sort of sensibility that you brought in thinking of your work as a organic thing, a dynamic thing, and not just this static, linear thing. First I did this, then I did this, and then, you know, by benchmark 1 I'm going to talk about those 2 things, and then I'm going to do 4 more things for benchmark 2, and then I'm going to have 6 things to talk about. You benched things and I think helped focus your work. I did think that some of the things they thought about in the comments, like, you know, the sort of planning and the architectural details about, you know, the inside and outside spaces, I thought those were really interesting conversations that, you know, with maybe a little bit more time, your work would be even more provocative and refined if you solved those solve those issues. I think your work would have really been super strong if the renderings were even taken up another notch or 2. Like if you were to you have a piece that you have a piece that I think could be published. So that may be something to think about. You also had a terrific question and answer session, which I thought was really kind of fun. You know? You led that conversation. You were teaching us during that conversation.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. I just felt like I was more interactive than I've ever been in a.
You were very comfortable, and I don't know that if you hadn't been up north, you would have been that way. I think if you were sitting there leading that conversation, you wouldn't have been there. That wouldn't have happened for you. So take that for what it's worth. I'm just reading through my notes.
Yeah.
You know, when I think about the whole first series of diagrams with respect to the sleep analysis and the setbacks and the non or the odd lots, all of that stuff, you know, that ended up being a very small, that was a very important thing, but it became a very small thing in the initial presentation, right? The whole discussion very early on, even before there were drawings, became kind of a subtle basis of the discussion on Saturday, but it was really a big focus early on as you were trying to find your legs, right? What you were going to stand on. So again, I really appreciate the sort of expansive thinking that you took on at the beginning of the semester, and then the sort of commitment to focusing on what needed to happen to accomplish the work within the time you had. So that's my impression.
Yeah, I like too. They talked a lot about like shared community living and things like that. It wasn't really my focus, but like the more I kind of thought about that in my project, it really was a major component of the project.
And I think it's really an important point that I'd like to start drilling into with Missing Middle next year, because one of the things that struck me, even about your project, but like Michael's, even Justin's, Catherine, these were big units. Everybody did big things. And the thing I loved about Jonathan Tate's work, for instance, was there's nothing big about it. right? Everything was like ridiculously small. And yet, when you understood his commitment to the concern for economy and accessibility in terms of the current real estate market, you can understand why his work looks that way now, right?
Right.
So I think that's something I want to like, sort of pick next term.
Yeah, he definitely focuses on economy and scale. I would have loved to have talked to him more too. I don't know if I can reach out to him like through LinkedIn or something like this.
Well, I did. That's how I met him.
Yeah, because there's like a lot I want to ask him too about that project, that starter home project that I can't really find on through research or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I would connect with him on LinkedIn and explain who you are. And next time you guys travel down south,
Yeah.
wherever I go, I try to see architecture and meet with architects because you never know where things are going to turn out.
Right. I also liked what Martin said about architects getting back into housing. I thought that was really important. I think we live in a very like developer-driven sort of environment, built environment.
I know.
Yeah.
And it's also, I think, kind of important that that architects maintain some sort of understanding or concern for doing architecture for those that can, engage us. That's why I showed you the work of the Rural Studio at one moment during the semester.
Yeah.
To sort of remind you of that.
Is that like so Samantha mentioned like a design center, neighborhood design center, and I know Columbus has something like that too, but is that sort of what they do? They do a lot of like sort of pro bono.
Yes. Yeah, so she works for the DCDC, the Detroit Community Design Center in Detroit at UDM.
Okay.
And she's there right now, and she'll work there for the summer unless an architect grabs her.
And is that like an unpaid position?
No. They do get small fees, and they do pay the staff. I think they actually university.
Oh, I see.
But I'm not positive. Jackson, Mississippi has one. I think there's probably a few of them around the country. But it's an office. Dan Patera from UDM. He's one of their favorite professors. He runs that program.
So they're probably usually connected like to a university in some sort of way.
Yeah, or some foundation.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not encouraging you to go into a doctoral program, but your thesis has all of the sort of aspects of something that could go there.
Yeah, I definitely found that I like the research side of things, and I like that research drives. I mean, well, that's why like with healthcare, I was interested in the evidence-based design thing too, because research as a driver of what we're making or what we're designing is an interesting prospect.
Do you have any other comments or questions?
I don't think so. I really liked the critics, and it was fun to meet everybody. I really liked meeting all these.
Me too.
Seeing all these tiny heads, for a semester. It's like full bodies. Oh, people have bodies, It's good to know.
How tall are you, Mark?
Yeah, sorry.
That was my favorite question.
I feel like I know you, so I could ask you that. But I probably wasn't very appropriate. Yeah. So I apologize.
Oh, that was hilarious. Yeah, that was fun. So yeah, that was really kind of interesting. that is the first time that I've been able to meet all of the students in the same room. I've always had one student that has not been able to be there for the review. So not that that's an issue or a problem, but just that was kind of extraordinary that you were all there this time. So that was cool. And Martin's remark about housing is really kind of interesting too, because back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, even into the 70s, architects made that the commitment for housing largely because the architects from the Bauhaus came to America and talked about housing with their students at IIT, at Harvard, Princeton, at Yale, at Cornell, and then those students ended up taking that into like homes for the wealthy in Connecticut, Long Island, upstate New York, right? Breuer, Mies, Philip Johnson, right? Neutra,
Yeah.
all those guys missed the point of the message because it was housing for those that were going to hire architects, not housing for the government, who was providing housing for the citizens of the country that they were affiliated with.
Right. Yeah, I went to the Ford Foundation or the Ford Museum, the Henry Ford. So they had a Buckminster Fuller
The Dymaxion House.
Yeah, that was so cool to see. But so it was 46. It was after the war. All these GIs are coming back. They're trying to like build all this housing. But the cost of it was actually like 1.5 times the cost of a conventional house. So like
Exactly, which is why it never had legs.
It doesn't make sense. Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
So everybody moved to Levittown.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why most of America looks like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing. We never sort of took up the interest in housing, and now it's going to become incredibly critical. Who knows? So good luck tomorrow.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let me know how that goes.
I will. Thanks.
And actually, let me know send me a note about Burn so I can look them up.
About who? Oh, the firm? Yeah.
The firm that you're talking about.
Yeah, okay. Will do.
Okay. Have a great summer.
Yeah, thanks for a great semester.
You're welcome. Thank you for making it great. We'll talk soon, okay?
Thanks, Jamie. Okay.
Let's see. Brandon, are you next?
Yep.
Okay, Brandon. You gave a very smooth presentation. You read it, but it didn't seem like it was, canned or read. I mean, one could tell that you were reading it, but it also was one that I think people got the sense that you were delivering it in a nicely paced, nicely sort of animated talk. It was very smooth. It had the right level of sort of freshness to it. So I thought that ended up serving you pretty well, and I think it helped you keep on point and on time. So I definitely appreciated that. I also want you to sort of recognize that that you're really one of the very first people I've seen that have taken the word gentrification and understood it or grasped it, and in fact discussed it as a positive thing. But you have to also, I think, maybe recognize that it's still a word that ruffles the feathers, and understandably so, of a lot of people, particularly those that were displaced, right, by the act of gentrifying a neighborhood. The gentrification has usually meant the sort of the disconnection of a family and their home from the place that they've lived in, so that someone else can buy that home right? And do what you wanted to do there. So it generally was not a positive transaction. It was a leveraged transaction. It was usually what you might call in business a hostile takeover. So if you start to read in real estate and maybe in literature, in periodicals and books about gentrification, you'll realize that it's a very messy word. And gentrification is not just in the construction and development of real estate to make new real estate where crappy real estate exists, but that gentrification was a way that the freeways are and were constructed in many of the poorest neighborhoods, not simply in Detroit, but in almost any major city. The planners of these freeways, for example, located the footprint of the freeway in areas that they deemed to be the least or the most hopeless, the least hopeful. And they threw a little bit of money at those individuals to get rid of them so that they could build something that they thought was more important than the contentment of the people living in those homes. And so it was often, unfortunately, a very divisive, if not racially motivated decision. So that word comes to the conversation usually charged like that. So as you begin to talk about your work and think back about it, if you reflect on it this next semester, or if you talk about this work, in job interviews, you'll want to be very careful about that, and maybe read up on it a little bit more. And I think your opinion of it will grow stronger, and I think it will become maybe even a little bit more well-rounded. But it was definitely an interesting position for you to take, and I'm really glad that you looked harder at Lafayette Park, and ultimately, I think if you get over to Lafayette Park, in the next couple of weeks, you're going to see it in the best possible light. It's really an utterly beautiful place. And as you said, it's the most beautiful example and the best example of what gentrification can be. But honestly, to close on the conversation of gentrification, there's not been any other place that has come close. Every other example of it, every other development that has had that as a motive or an impetus has paled by comparison. Actually, if you drill really deep into the Mies plans for Lafayette Park, you'll learn that it was intended to mostly be accessible housing, an alternative to the housing that they demolished. But it was so beautiful, and he was so popular an architect at the time, that a lot of people like you and me started renting there and buying a co-op there because we saw the beauty, the charm, the proportion, and the benefit of living there. And it ended up sort of getting snapped up by a lot of what they call the cognoscenti, right? Those in the know. Today it's a wonderful place. It's gotten wildly expensive, but it is one of the more diverse locations in Detroit. But it came at considerable cost, at the erasure of the Black Bottom neighborhood. Let's see. I'm just reading through my notes here. I think that you were challenged a little bit on the size and the scale of the design of those units, and I thought you handled that discussion pretty well. When you started to talk about the proportions and the sizes of each of the floors, I think that kind of quieted the concerns. I think the best example was when you pointed out the house on the northwest corner of those rotated site plans, where the park was at the bottom of the sheet and Woodward would have been at the top of the sheet if it was there.
Yeah.
And you said that here's a single-family residence, and this was typical of what was in that neighborhood, even if it was destroyed, and that this is where one single family, maybe an extended family, but a single family was intended to live there. And you can see that in the sort of equivalent footprint, I'm able to get 3 single families living there. And I thought that was quick thinking on your part, and it was you were able to make that argument, I think, because of the way you drew that drawing and because of the way you included that part of the context. And so maybe the point I would make, so that's the point, I'm giving you a high five for that, but also, when you're dealing with things that might be controversial, right, or charged, or even better, right, more luxurious, better than what's there, sometimes the best way to make that connection, sometimes the best way to make that case is by comparison, right? And so the drawing of that footprint of the house helped make that comparison. So the comparative diagram is often a very, very calming, has a very calming effect in a conversation like the one you were leading. So I thought that was pretty smart on your part.
Okay.
I think also, I was talking to Jamie a moment ago about extending the work, and if you definitely seem to enjoy doing that kind of work, and you enjoy doing the kinds of drawings that work deserves. Ultimately, you may find that you can do beautiful drawings of work that's not that refined and not that expensive, and you would do the culture of architecture well if you could embrace that, right? That's my honest comment. But I also think that the inevitable concern for you might have been just how much does this stuff cost? When I draw, these rooms with these kinds of trim packages, or this kind of lighting, these kinds of millwork, what am I saying, right? And what's the impact of that? Are these $150 a square foot, $200, $250, $300? And then just say, okay, let's say it's all of those costs per square foot, or that I know that I can design to those numbers. It might have been interesting to run the pro forma, right? And say, okay, so at $200 a square foot, this 3-story townhome would cost this much to build, and it would cost this much to sell. And someone, if they spent 30% of their income on housing, they'd have to be earning this much to live here.
Yeah, that'd be kind of a neat case study to.
Yeah, and I think that would have been that would have been another layer that would have engaged Jonathan, and it would have been another way to exemplify who you were trying to target and what kind of revenue stream they were needing to make to crack the nut that they would have to crack to live in one of your products. So I think that would have been a good thing to have looked at. Let's see. Yeah, economics. Who can afford these? Someone said the scale may be out of whack, but I think you answered that. My footprint holds 3 families, whereas existing houses only had 1. So I guess that's what Ryan was saying. How could, this is a nicely done project, but how could the people that live here coexist with the people that you would be attracting here? And all things considered, it kind of telegraphs a signal of exclusivity. And maybe cities are really meant to be not just places where the poor lives, and not just places where the wealthy live, but really places where we all live. And that could have been, I think, something that you try to tap into, that really the best places are the ones that have mixture, and talking a little bit more about sort of urban mixture, social mixture, cultural mixture, racial mixture, that I think would have served you well. I'm sort of telling you all the things that, you know, if you had more time, you might want to think about, but obviously that's not the issue here. But like if you were interested to pursue these, or if you ever became interested in developing something like this, you know, here or back in Windsor, these were things that I would, you know, want you to start thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the exploded axonometric and I think that ended up reading kind of dark, and maybe if you at least on the screen there was a lot, it was like high contrast, so maybe the stuff that gets cut in section is like backed off in value a little bit so that it's a little bit more legible. But overall the drawings were really quite lush, they were really quite beautiful, and I think you should recognize that. I think everybody appreciated that. I think you got a sense of that from the comments that you read today, and you really, I think, it appears that you enjoy working the drawings, that you enjoy producing that kind of story with your drawings, and I think that's a really strong skill set. If anybody sees those drawings other than your own boss, they're going to want to bring you in. They're going to want to hire you, because those are the kinds of drawings that any office would want to be producing today. So I hope that you take this compliment for what it's intended to do, which is to give you a little bit of confidence. Not that you need it, because you strike me as someone who's pretty sure of himself. After all, you are Maltese, right? And
That's right.
I think that you know they are really quite beautiful, and they were appropriate as a drawing type for the kind of architecture you were describing. So, you know, continue to explore this craft, continue to sort of refine the craft of drawing. There's other ways to render that stuff, and whatever software you begin working with, I think you'll have a good command of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. My goodness, are you kidding? I also appreciated how you were always concerned for what I thought. I personally don't think that what I have to say matters. Oh my goodness, my dogs. I might have to go downstairs and let them out.
That's fine.
Okay. I don't think that what I have to say is really the final. I'm not the final arbiter. And I always hope that students doubt what I have to say just as a point of like reference, because I'm not nearly always right. But I think what I'd say to you is that in an office, I think being proactive and saying, hey, can I share with you where I'm going? Hey, can I touch base with you and just do a quick page turn so that you're not surprised, or so that another set of, I've been looking at this for 3 straight days and I've got a doubt. I can't put my finger on why I've got this feeling, and I just want to sort of go through it, and maybe if you look at it, you'll have a reaction to it that validates my anxiety, right?
Yeah.
That's what I look for in a good team member, and I think that if you continue to do that in your own world, in your own job, you'll be served well, and you will find as you continue to have those conversations, you're going to pocket all of those conversations away. You're going to remember them all and store them, and pretty soon, Brandon, people will be coming to you for your input on that stuff. And you're going to remember what those people said, and it's going to be filtered by your own experiences, and you're going to become a leader in wherever you are. And I think that that's how the craft is passed on, and that's how the craft of architecture will get better, right? So I enjoyed that. I was never put upon when you did that. I was never too busy to do that for you or for anyone, but so I don't want you to feel like that was the wrong thing to do. In fact, I endorse that. And I think it's a good protocol for a young architect in an office to have, which is to to be not necessarily the squeaky wheel, but to be communicative, right? To share your work as a process with the people that you're working with. I think it's a good strategy. So kudos to you for doing that.
Thanks.
Did you have any questions about your critics' comments?
I think all of them were pretty good. I guess I was kind of curious to know. I guess one of the questions I was just trying to correlate whose comments were reflected of what grade sheet that was submitted. I know some had their initials.
Yeah,
I
they
couldn't
all
remember everybody's name.
Yeah,
So
Samantha is SS,
okay.
Christoph is CI, and
Okay.
Ryan is RM. I don't have Betsy's yet.
Okay, so those were just the three. I was wondering whose they were. That's why I was kind of trying to understand. So Martin didn't fill one out, and you hadn't
No.
filled one out. Okay.
No, I haven't done yours yet.
Okay. So all right, I'll go back and now
So
that
you're
I
going to
know.
get Betsy's. You're going to get Betsy's soon. It's going to have BW on it, and then I send one after that.
I won't be able to read Betsy's anyways, so
Yeah,
fine.
I remember that with you.
I'll just look at where her check marks are, I guess. But no, it's good to see like the feedback that they gave you at the crit, and then
Yeah.
to see what they physically wrote
What they
down
wrote?
and where they
Yeah.
saw you were either from a design standpoint, presentation standpoint. So that's what I kind of like. I like that. Like, 'cause not all of them gave a lot of feedback. Like Samantha did a lot. Christoph didn't really have a lot to say, but it's good
Yeah.
that he reflected it in his
writing.
So, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's good to have, you know what I mean? I know that with the time constraints, not everybody can speak, so it's good to at least have written feedback. You know what I mean? That you can always check back on. I know we have the YouTube video, obviously, but, you know what I mean? I imagine I'm not going to go back to that 3 or 4 times. You know what I mean? I'll probably watch it once and that's it. So it's good to have that hard copy feedback to use as something that's measurable for.
Yeah, and it's something that you know, those marks could be, they could be all over the place, right?
Yeah.
Someone might have been like a staunch anti-gentrification
I hope
person,
not.
right? And that could have like completely tanked your presentation, your grade, right? From her or his perspective. So that's just something to sort of take stock of, and so you're going to get a nice sort of range, right, of feedback. And I think that's one of the other reasons, and I think I said that to you early on, one of the other reasons why I really appreciate this approach of bringing in lots of critics, just to give you all kinds of feedback, right?
Definitely. Yeah,
Good.
it's good to have as many eyes as you can put on it to get.
That's
as
right.
many-
Well, I think that's what I was saying just a moment ago. I enjoyed having you in the semester. I think you're a very talented young man. One thing I would say that you know, sometimes the individuals with talent can be the most difficult, right? Because they think they know it all. So my parting shot to you would be a remark that Frank Gehry once told me, which is challenge what you know. Don't assume that what you know is the way it should be. Challenge even the things that you know, and I think that will keep you modest and keep you centered and keep you burning bright. Because I think when someone with talent raises the questions about what it is that they know, much less what it is that they don't know, that's what's really going to propel the profession.
Sure, definitely.
Cool.
I like that. I'm gonna write that down.
Put it on a piece of paper under a magnet on your fridge.
I will.
All right. You have a nice summer, okay, Brandon?
All right, you too. Take care, Mark.
Thank you. Okay, Heather, are you next?
I believe so.
I think so too. Did you enjoy the conversation on Saturday?
I did. I thought it was a good conversation. I kind of wish I knew about the conversations happening in Detroit a little bit more earlier, so we could do more research on communal lot ownership. But
yeah,
it was definitely a good thing to consider and look into in the future and know more about.
Yeah, I think you and Jamie had to work super hard to know us and Detroit and the sort of USA sort of system of ownership and land and all of that, and and yet at the same time, I think you both had projects that were provocative in that regard. Sometimes the best work for a place can be done by someone who doesn't know it, right? And they don't take anything for granted, and that everything they look at, all the evidence that they take in, is something that becomes important to them because they don't have anything to compare it to, right? From their own sort of field of experience.
Right.
Let's see. Well, I think I've confessed to you how important I think your project is and was.
Right.
And I hope that maybe the first time I said that you were a little unsettled or startled by it. And maybe as we continue to talk about why I thought it was important, it sunk in. But I hope that you, in looking at the comments that you got back and you reflecting on the conversations that kind of unpacked on Saturday, that it's kind of dawning on you. I mean, in other words, I think, like I was talking with Jamie earlier, yours is the kind of project that is the kind of thing, not necessarily to become a PhD sort of dissertation like I was describing to her, but it is the kind of project that if you had the interest and the fascination for this kind of, you know, snap-on pod thing, and you wanted to explore it architecturally and constructionally and in terms of its deliverability and affordability, right? That, quite honestly, there's a whole bunch of people, right, that would or could align themselves with you, and there's like a potential for a practice of architecture that you would run that could come from that as a starter project.
Right.
Right. I don't know if you've ever thought of that, but that's kind of what I was saying at the very beginning of the term, that the work that you all are about to do this semester, I assured you, though I'm sure you were like, what? But I was trying to say that the work you were about to do is something that could become a life work. It could become the body of work for an individual. The scenario has to be right. You know, you have to be doing it in an office that would encourage it, or you have to have your own office in order to do it, or you have to teach and let it grow legs there, right? But it could be, and that's what I want you to understand. I want you to sort of, you know, take it that way. I want you to sort of feel like that what you were doing was promising in that way, and that's why it was also important. Let me look at some of my other notes here. Yeah, there were lots of comments. You had a very interesting discussion because of the nature of the work. The research, I thought, was well presented again. Betsy said to me afterwards, actually she said to me today, that yours was a thesis level project. That that she would have expected someone like you taking on a theme like this in a one-year thesis. So, and she's taught that before. She's a faculty member and an architect, so she was like thumbs up about your work in that regard. I think Christoph thought that what you were doing was raising very important and interesting questions. The whole idea of increasing density in existing lots was very interesting. But maybe how to confront density or the question of density in the vacant lots. I think maybe that was a little fuzzier in your presentation. I think in some cases you had the pods described on vacant lots, but I don't think you talked about that clearly or emphatically enough. And I think that because I think what you talked about most emphatically and most clearly was in terms of how the pods snapped onto existing houses. And while that has lots of merit in terms of like direct applicability and direct sort of marketability for your idea, I think the project tried to deal with both site scenarios, and I don't think the standalone vacant lot scenario was as clear as it could have been.
Right.
I think the last rendering was way too dark. The final rendering, the money shot, your last plate, the perspective plate.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's showing like all of it, kind of. Yeah, I could see that. I was thinking that when I was doing it, but then I like tried a couple fixes in Photoshop and it didn't work. So
yeah, I would try to re-render. I would try to re-render that so it's a lot. So like maybe it's not black, but like a charcoal gray.
Right.
Right. Like a gunmetal gray, or even a little lighter than gunmetal, and maybe with light hitting it. I mean, I love the idea, those temporal renderings where they were showing snow, but like, so now do a sunlight rendering. Remember how Michael always talked about that moment just as the sun was rising and or setting, and like the tops of his buildings always had like a glint of orange light on it. You know, that kind of moment could have been described on that thing, but it was too dark, I think. Yeah, I mean, if you were to take this into another semester or into a practice, becoming more specific about how these things attach, you know, how do they stitch in, how do they join, what do you have to do to the existing wall, what's like the instruction kit look like when that happens? That could have been an interesting diagram. You know, cut hole in existing vertical wall 8 inches bigger than the you know, cut an 8-inch female hole to receive 8 inches larger than the male pod that's going to, you know, glom onto this, and then this is how you flash it. You know, this is how you fill in the area that's overcut. You know, that kind of stuff. This is the length of the flashing bits that goes around the funny shape that I've created. That, you know what I'm saying? Like an instruction kit.
Yeah.
Like that could have been very interesting, and that would have not required a rendering, but thinking about its viability, thinking about its plausibility would be what you'd want to do in the next semester. I thought Martin's comments, you know, were classic Martin. How rich can a simple form be? You know, why do these funny shapes? Well, Martin, I mean, you know, you're revealing your age when you say things like that. And while I agree with him a lot of the time, I did appreciate the quirky shapes that you offered in these things. But at the same time, you know, I think there's kind of like, if you were to think about this as a product that you would sell at Lowe's, or you'd sell at the lumber yard, or you'd sell online, right? Then you would probably move toward simple rather than complex.
Right.
So that's like a good focus group comment, right? You take the idea to a focus group who's all going to sit there with their arms folded, you know, like this, and then Martin, that focus group has got Martin in it, and that's what she or he's going to say, right? I also thought, for me, I think maybe the most interesting comment was how the void spaces could have been designed to become more in alignment with the things you talked about in the Detroit Future City book, and how this could integrate into it. Not so taking this pod idea out of the marketplace and the conversation that it could work in Springfield or Hamilton or London or Cincinnati, and thinking about now how this actually fits Detroit. Knowing what you know, having talked about like the Detroit Future City, knowing what you know about the green, the green patterns that were being proposed in this neighborhood, how this could have like tied in more, how it would have embedded more in that. I thought that was an interesting comment. Everyone appreciated the amount of thought. What about community plots? Could those have pod-like shapes, or could they connect to those pods? Who owns these? Is it a choice? Is it something that you share? How does this happen? Again, all of these questions they're all good questions, but they come from wanting to keep like my dog shaking a toy, not wanting to let go of it because they're enjoying having the toy in their mouth, right? And I think that's the sign of a really provocative and interesting project. So the questions that you were getting, I think, are illustrative of the engagement, the terms of engagement, the way that people were engaging the project.
Great.
Yeah, I just wrote a bunch of things as you were talking, just sort of listing the things that you talked about and the things that you showed. Not anything I can talk further about here, but I think your project could have stood like 2 more weeks of really intense scrutiny on the drawings, and it would have been like top drawer project, probably one of the most important projects in the ADS semester, and I think you were very close at getting there, and I really wanted to see you get there, and I think that if you maybe adjust a couple of those drawings for this summer before the summer class, that you'll agree, and I'd be happy to look at them, Heather, if you do adjust them. But I think you'll agree that the project takes on a whole new character by sort of submitting them to that last sort of like editing process. Did you enjoy the project? Did you feel like you were like struggling with it, or is this kind of like comparable to the things that you're interested in? I mean, I had not seen anybody do a project like this before, so I'd like to get a little feedback from you on how this happened for you, so that if I come across another student like you, I can get them to go into this terrain.
Right. I don't really know where this came from, to be honest with you, because I have never done a project like that before. So that's why at first when we were talking about like how important it was, that's why I was so like kind of standoffish about it, because I had no idea where it was gonna go, and I had no idea how to get to it. So I was just like, holy crap, what did I just get myself into, kind of thing. And I don't even know how I got to that, but then after I kind of like sat back and analyzed everything, it kind of like, that was when I looked at it, I guess, clearer, and was like, okay, this is where I'm trying to get to, and this is how I need to kind of get there. And then from there, I felt like it kind of pushed a lot better in the right direction. Because at midterm, I felt like I was just kind of like all over the place, and I had no idea what I was doing. But then after a conversation, so I think like, yeah, I wish I had like just a couple more weeks to really like polish everything off, and I took a day off of work too to get everything off, and I couldn't get any more days off than that. But yeah, like, I don't know, like I really enjoyed it, ended up enjoying it. I was really scared at midterm that it just would like lowball and I would end up digging myself a big grave or something like that. But yeah, I think it turned out pretty good. Like a couple of the comments of like creating a basic pod was something I was looking at, but it was like I had a week left, and So it was kind of like I gotta just focus on what I'm doing right now and get that stuff pushed out, and then if I have time, I'll come back to that. And I didn't end up
Right.
having time.
Right.
But like I felt like the whole semester, like I don't know really what you can do differently, because I felt like you the whole time were like you recognized what was important about my project. You let me know kind of why you felt that way and where it came from, and then also you still like gave me really valuable precedents to look at. And Jamie gave me a precedent of the Arca blocks. She sent that to me. So it's kind of like everyone gave me good advice along the way, and it helped me and
Excellent.
it kind of shaped me in the right direction.
Excellent. Good. Well, I'm glad about that. And I mean, it's kind of hard, I think, to say early on or even at midterm, as we get deeper into a project, that these projects are important. There's really no sort of evidence of that, except to say that I do have evidence for it. Let me explain. And this is why I have said it. I just don't remember to bring this up. But like a guy from that class in the fall of 2014 was doing a project in his hometown. He was, doing a mixed-use building. That's because that's what I was interested in then. And I kept pushing him, and he did eventually pretty well in the class. Not even the best student in the class, not even the best drawings, but an important project for what he was saying about his city and what this library that he was designing needed to do, what it needed to be, where it needed to be, in contrast to where the city thought it needed to be. And he ended up exchanging his ideas in conversation and then the drawings with the city planner and then with the library board, and then he started presenting it to the library board, and he got the work published in the local newspaper. And I mean, it's not going to be a project, but he started to change the course of the conversation with his own work done in our studio. And that's why architects can be part of these conversations. It may not be a commission that he gets, but he now believes that he can make a difference, that the power of one individual is a pretty significant thing. David against Goliath, right? And he was able to believe in himself and slay Goliath in this scenario by having reasoned research and by having good plates to show that research, and then having the sort of speaking voice, being able to talk about it from, being a citizen of this community and talking about it as a real and authentic thing. And so he drew on all of those things, and he's changing the conversation in his hometown right now. Another student from your side of the pond took his work with me from an earlier studio and revised it slightly to suit a different kind of site because it was transferable, and he won a Canadian national competition. He came in first place, and he won a dump truck of cash. So, yeah, that's not anything to sniff at, right? So, now is that what it's about? No, but I mean,
but it's a nice bonus.
He's feeling like that paid for his college, quite honestly. So, that's pretty darn cool. So yeah, it's pretty amazing what you guys can do when you sort of get into it and roll your sleeves up into it. I remember our conversation at midterm and shortly after midterm, and I don't think I was saying anything to you that I haven't said to anyone else.
Right.
So I'm going to keep being that way with the next class, and the hopes that maybe I encounter someone else like you who is impressed by that candor and that feedback and sees their own potential the way you have.
Yeah, I think this is the first project, just like Brandon said, that I really actually saw a real world application in versus because we had some crazy things going on with other studios. And
Who
I think
did you have for ADS1, Heather?
for ADS1, I had Honorbon and just like Brandon did and Vanessa. And we did, like mine was these crazy flood containers basically that like opened and closed with the flood waters and stuff. But like it was cool. But
Yeah, I mean,
like,
if
never
yeah,
gonna actually go.
if you were living in Houston right now, right, that would could be a very useful project.
Yeah. And like
It's
here in
probably hard to
London,
imagine its value in London. But,
yeah. But yeah, so I think that like definitely helped because when you actually could see it being built and
yeah,
actually working in real world, it like really kind of changes your perspective and gives you more passionate about it. At least I felt. And like if there was something that I could do in the future, I wouldn't not take that opportunity if I kind of came across.
good.
Because I do love working with housing and like one-on-one and with clients in that sort of way, versus my office right now is doing a ton of university projects, which are fun too, but it's very much less personal and with universities because go to these presentations and it's a whole board
Yep.
of people, right? And
Yep.
they're just trying to think of what the students might want or what the students might need, but they don't get input from the students.
Yeah.
So like it's like I don't understand where you're coming. Like in the last meeting we were at it was on Tuesday. We were with a university here, and well, they came to our office, but they're actually in Ottawa. And so we had this whole boardroom full of all these people, and I sat in on this conversation, and they're literally like writing down and making up programming as we're going through the meeting. So like they just were like, oh, well maybe we'll kind of need this sort of lab classroom. We could kind of use it for this. And I'm like, you're throwing this out from nowhere. Like you don't know if you actually need that or the students actually want that kind of space. So it's like it was a very interesting meeting because the whole meeting was just like very casual and them throwing out all these ideas the whole time, which all this stuff is due like this Friday.
You might have to take the reins on that conversation next time.
Yeah. So it was like I have never been in a meeting like this before.
Say, speaking of work, this is not the place to bring it up now, but I'm available to you if you want to continue the conversation we started last week.
Right. I got the papers on the Wednesday before our presentation. So I just I signed them for the next 4 months. And then I'm going to be looking while I'm working. Because I figured not signing them and not having a job was a bad decision. So
yeah. You have a revenue stream for 4 months or less.
And then I have time to kind of a little bit of a buffer to figure out and apply to places and stuff. So
good.
So that's my task this week.
Good. Well, let me know what you need help in if you want to start exploring new territory.
Okay.
All right. I've enjoyed having you in the class. I hope you have a great summer. And I was really pleased to meet you.
Yeah, it was nice to actually come down and meet everyone.
You made it back safely. It wasn't that drive is. I'm sorry. It's just very dull once I get to Sarnia.
I know. Just all fields.
It's very flat, except for the Burger King about an hour of the way there.
Yeah. But I didn't go back right away because my sister actually had her baby.
Jackson, right?
Yeah. She had her baby at 10:30 during her presentation. So yeah. So I went straight to there and made them meals and hung out for the weekend. So.
Oh, good for you. How nice. So you didn't get back to London until last night then?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, that worked out nicely.
Yeah, it did. But it was a long one for her. It was like 32 hours, so
yeah,
she was hating life after that. But
well, congratulations on being an aunt.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great summer, okay, Heather?
You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you.
Okay, let's see. Catherine, are you next?
Yep.
Alrighty. I might have told a couple of people, Catherine, a couple of people like Betsy and Christoph, about your sort of tragedies over the course of this semester, and they both said that it was not even evident in your work that you were distracted by some very profound things this term. So I think that says an awful lot about your ability as a mature architect and as a mature person to focus amidst all of that justifiable distraction around you. So hats off to you for bluffing and being a good poker player.
Cool. Yeah, it was could you tell I only slept 1 hour for the 2 nights going into presentation?
No, of course not.
2 nights.
Of course not. I don't want to know that.
I was on. I tried to reflect back, and I did watch the video. So thank you for sending the link, because I remember when I left, I was extremely jittery because I was living on those monster drinks. But of course, part of the high was, obviously coming from awake in a funeral.
Yeah.
Hours before, and wanting to have a presentation that I would be happy to stand there and deliver, knowing what was in here, trying to get it out. Obviously, I look back over the weekend because everyone's at like, how'd it go? And I'm like, you know what? And I hate having to classify it. Well, given everything that was on the go and how my time was, I'm very happy with what I delivered.
You should.
But there's that part where you look back and it's like, boy, I would have liked to have done this. I would have liked to have worked with the site a little bit more. There's, I had a contemporary design for the duplex townhouse. The corners were extruded on the duplex, and they were very contemporary looking, like type bay windows, but then the roof lines are very, very intricate on those for that large of a massing building. And it was like, sort of like what Heather just said, where you sort of look and you go, okay, I've got to focus because I have to deliver. So cut your losses, focus on what you need to have done to deliver, and if you get time to go back and revisit, do that. And so that was sort of the selection process of.
And you know what? That's life.
Yes, exactly.
That's what you have to do.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing I'd like to say is that in doing what you did, I don't want to know about the 1 hour sleep anymore, and I don't want to know about the monster drinks, but in doing what you did and getting it done for last Saturday, you finished the semester as opposed to having an extension, and so now you can go into the summer semester or with whatever load you feel like you can take or that you're going to take. You can go in knowing that you don't have some loose sweater threads to tie and to loop up, that you can move into that term free and clear, and knowing that you met and in many ways exceeded the expectations of the studio. So I'm appreciative to you for that, and I hope that you recognize how important that was for you. You may not today or okay, so but I know you will be in about 2 weeks when the summer starts. You're a good leader. You're a good person in the studio. Jamie is the same kind of soul. You share, you give, and you are collaborative, and I think those are good aspects in any person in an office. It may come from being a mom. It may come from being more experienced, which I would expect. But I think it also just comes from who you are. But it also comes out in a different way too. So all of that's good, but it shows up in a different way for you and for Jamie. There's a sense of confidence. If you guys watch your videos, there's a sense of calm and deliberateness, and in the way that you both speak, there's a sense of assuredness that comes out in your presentation. Now, for you, it might have been just total, utter exhaustion and just trying to muddle through it. But honestly, I think it's just the way you always present, and I think that instills a sense of confidence in your clients and in the people that you're speaking to. So when you look back at that presentation again, look for that quality in you and try to draw on that as you continue to sort of move into our career, right? Into this career, our profession, because I think that's going to serve you very well, Catherine. I'm just looking at my notes here. I guess I'd say for you that the thing I would want you to do the next time is I really appreciated your openness to looking at case studies, and I place high value on the role of a case study, not just in my studio but in the office. And I've always been that way, but my office is crazy about case studies, and so that's why I fit in very well there. But it's not just collecting the case study. It's actually taking it apart and implementing the case study, trying to find a way to use the case study as a design motif in your own work. And if you continue to be open to case studies and continue to expand the sort of field of vision of what could be a case study in your own work, your work will get richer. Your own personal work will get stronger. And as someone who I presume will do what you're going to do, Catherine, which is maintain her business, right? I mean, I think that's what you should consider trying to do, is to enhance your portfolio, enhance your vocabulary of what's being designed, what has been designed, to let that become part of your own sort of ammunition as a designer in your community, or whatever community you move to or end up living in. It may be that you stay there forever, and I think you would do very well staying there forever, but I think it will help separate you from the other firms that are there. I guess the other thing that maybe I would encourage you to do, and it becomes kind of important in graduate work, but maybe it's not something that is going to be accurate for you professionally. But in graduate school, we tend to want you to focus. You know, we talked about expansion and sort of focus, expansion and contraction in terms of the research and graduate studio. You tend to be very much always about expansion, and I think that you might have been better off this semester trying to focus on fewer things and doing fewer things as well as you can. And I think it comes. I think what I'm hearing myself talk here, so there's a reverberation. But I guess what I'm saying is that there's a quality in you that wants to make sure that we take care of everything, and I think that's kind of in your DNA. But I think when we spoke, maybe after the pinup review, and I said, let's take this out of the work. Let's take this out of the project and render it as a transparent, ghosty box. And I'll focus on these things. I think it helped your timeline, and it helped your focus. And I wish I had said that earlier in the class, because one of the things I think that Christoph observed and that he appreciated was the idea of taking one edge of this sort of neighborhood, one corner at this intersection and populating it with all of what you were trying to populate it with. And he thought that there was a lot of merit in that. And he saw the merit in the 5-year and like 15-year plan that you were proposing. But I also think that it's easy to get lost in that obligation. It's easy to get overwhelmed in designing everything. So I'm glad that we agreed that you should do less so that you could do it more, what you were going to do would be more thorough and complete. But at the same time, I wish I had noticed that sooner. And I would encourage you to, like, knowing that we've just had this conversation tonight, I would encourage you to listen for that bell to ring the next time, right? Because it's only going to, you're the only one that's going to hear it, because I'm not going to be around the next time. So when you sort of take on more, because it's maybe in your DNA, maybe it's because you're a mom, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm the same way, and I'm not a mom. I'm not even a parent. But like when you try to take on more to be complete and be thorough, to be controlling of the whole scenario, something slips through the cracks. So when you find yourself in that scenario and the bell's going off, listen to the bell. Does that help? Is that clear?
It does, and it greatly helped that you had discussed with me about, taking those. Sorry, Caden, I'm on. No. Tomorrow. Go talk to Dad. Go talk to Dad. Go close the door. Sorry. I think it's the first time they've actually come in walking while I'm talking. Last day, right? Oh gosh.
It is. Tell her it's the last day.
Yeah, he's had a busy day. Piano lessons and soccer on one night, so.
That's a lot. I'm just looking through my notes as you're talking. Go ahead.
I appreciated. I greatly appreciate that feedback, because it did help me to refocus on the two aspects: the live-work unit as well as the duplex townhouse, which were developed enough, not, in my opinion, not to discard those, but definitely the other. And it was really great for me to see how the conversation then adjusted from the midterm presentation, which got wrapped up on what am I doing with this cafe thing, to and being too much, where I know Betsy was just like, whoa, where are we looking? And that was a big cue. And then when we discussed it, whereas this conversation, I was able to focus on my 2 units, show how they connected. It seemed like people appreciated the connection. Definitely, I took a lot away. Like now that I look at the plan, even right before presentation, where I put the carriage house out, thinking, wow, that really is an open opportunity now, but I don't have time to show what it would be. And it would have been nice just to show the futuristic, like, okay, here's the big sort of scheme of what I've showed. Here's like what you could do if you decide to put the carriage house. Here's what you could, and just in blocking formation, here's what you could do if you decide to use the green space, because Christoph mentioned the connection to the green space.
We talked about it.
We talked about it, and so did Ryan. Ryan brought up aspects of that, because he saw the pavement.
That's right.
My pavement was still in the same orientation based on the old carriage house. So there was a lot of stuff like that I drew. It was really great to just go right from the midterm and kind of and review what that was, and then see how the ending was. There was a lot more clarity, I thought, in my presentation and in how it came about. And that there was also a lot of lessons for me to learn in there. And I absolutely agree with what you say. In my whole life, I think it's maybe why I have so many issues with little things. I do tend to take on everything. Even in the house, I have a very hard time delegating off, because I feel like I have to, if I'm not part of it, something's going to get dropped, though I may be the person that's doing the dropping. So I agree. I appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, but if you drop it, you just pick it up. I mean, it's
That's
right.
it.
Maybe it needed to drop just so you didn't have to strain your back.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being in the studio. I think one of the most impressive things in me teaching an online studio are the students who made a concerted effort to meet me and meet the other students. And you and another individual who flew in from Anchorage to ride with me to Cincinnati on a field trip several years ago are some of the most memorable examples of what an online studio can be. I don't think they need to exist just here, like we are talking right now, but they can exist in real, authentic time and space. And so I really appreciated meeting you back in January when you drove out that day. And I especially appreciated you coming out, given everything else in your life last week that was happening, so that you could be with everyone else at the review.
And
So
I
that was
think it says
awesome.
a lot, and I think it says a lot to you that you know, given the fact that nobody was having to fly him, but the fact that your whole group wanted to come together. And
Yeah, that was cool.
I did. It was one of the highlights, and it was one of the driving forces. Like when scheduling, I don't know. I thought my uncle shone a little light down on the situation by saying, "Guess what? Funeral's going to be Friday. Therefore, she's like 3.5 hours away. She can go do it." And it just worked out that way. And I look at it that way. It helped me to refocus. But I think it says a lot for you. Your teaching style has been just wonderful. I greatly appreciate it. It has been, and I'm sure it's the same for the other students, but being an older one and knowing sort of my direction is very much different than the other kids that are 25 years younger than me.
Sure.
It's just been a really great end of a master's studio session for me. I'm a very strong believer in continuing in education, obviously. I mean, to come back at 50 years old and I have people going, "What the heck are you doing? You don't need to." I don't need to, but I love learning. I've learned a lot from the other students. I love being around the other students. I think it keeps you young too. I've greatly appreciated what you have brought to the learning process for me. I absolutely appreciated all the lecture series that you did, and that definitely went into my notes for your appraisal thing. I think it's something that is great because you introduced me to so many buildings I did not know. Because very often, at least for me, I live in my little
Reality.
yeah,
It's
and
so
so
easy
you
to do that.
expanded it. You expanded it greatly, and it was always very relevant to what was on the go. And I have my little critter. Say hi, Kaden, quickly.
Hi.
Okay, Mr. Farlow's
Hey.
very busy. My review.
Dad,
No,
Hi,
you need to go.
Mom.
You need to
can
go.
I have the $5 for
Bye.
tomorrow?
Bye.
Can I?
I'll talk to you. If you bug me, I'm not going to answer the question at all, even for tomorrow. Let me finish. Thank you.
Well, I'll let you go. But I
Okay.
do appreciate your feedback, and that means a great deal. Thank you for that.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate
Stay in
it.
touch, okay? You have a great summer.
You too.
Bye, Catherine. Vanessa, are you next?
I am next.
Good. So, how do you feel about the review?
I thought it went good. It was
too.
very different than what I'm used to because of, all the online stuff. I mean, my final last semester was all online, so we were all on our own computers, and we were presenting in our own homes. And then this online interaction was different in the fact that we all went to campus, but it was still online, and there were monitors, and I was sitting and presenting, and yet there were people there. It was an experience. So.
Yeah, I think it probably looked pretty strange too, but it's. I mean, if like one person isn't online in that review, if one person has to be online, and it was Jonathan, we had to broadcast it, right? We had to put it out there in an online format, and if I hadn't invited Jonathan. If Jonathan wasn't going to be there, I was going to text Lynn and tell her just to stay home.
Yeah.
We would have done a presentation, maybe in the other room or in the hall, and just with the monitor, not what we had ended up doing. But because I had Jonathan come in, we did it that way. I don't know quite what Anirban's pin-up or final review would have been like in an entirely online thing. Does he bring in critics, and how does that work?
I think they were in the room with him on campus, and then we were all online. It was very difficult to do all separate people online because we were presenting and we could see them, but we couldn't see our projects. So in order to see our projects, we had to pull it up small on our screen so we can still see what we were presenting. It was very different, very interesting.
Well,
But
I'm glad you had a different experience this year.
Yeah. So, and his was also much longer. It was so long.
Really?
Yeah, we were in class till like 12:30 or 1 at night, like in the evening on a Friday.
Oh my
Because it
God.
started at 7 p.m. and then ran for a million hours.
Well, that didn't happen with us, did it?
Nope. It was very nice.
Good. I'm just looking at my notes here. Bear with me. I kind of just documented everything you talked about. Okay, I'm just going to go right. So you had two concepts, Sketch 1 and Sketch 2, I think you called them. Sketch 2 does not look like Sketch 1. It's much lighter. It didn't have the same color. You might want to think about retreating that one for practice portfolio, or do that now, so that they are in effect an apples to apples comparison, and because they're equivalent in the way they were described, you see the difference, because right now you can't even see Sketch 2 very clearly. Parking is in the focus, and we'll call it. Oh, I also think that I thought it was really interesting that the comments about the three typologies generated, in your mind, equivalent building areas, but different porches, different outdoor sort of program areas, and that was very interesting. I hadn't really thought of your work framed that way, and I thought that was really good. But then when I thought about what Christoph was saying, you know, he said, I think it's just a little picky thing, but he was talking about how one of them only had the one bathroom.
Yeah, the roommate one.
Yeah, that was a very interesting observation, because it kind of put a chink in the armor of your sort of thinking about that. And I think that, I mean, I'm not suggesting that you go back and do it differently, but I guess I would task you from now on to be very, how do I say this? I mean, I really appreciated how you kind of said, I'm going to be doing these millennials and serving the millennial client because I'm a millennial and I know what my millennial friends like. But at the same time, I felt like that shouldn't have happened, kind of thing. You should have like known that would have been an issue by looking at the plan. So I don't know how we like prevent that from happening again, or how you kind of develop a rigor in your work so that you avoid that kind of misstep again. But I guess I would say try to challenge the things that you're saying even after you've said them. Try to always maintain a kind of a checks and balances in your own work, because you are, Vanessa, I think you're a very kind of strong individual. You have kind of you have an ability to sort of describe an opinion or to make a point of view, and it's fairly definitive. Has anybody ever said that to you before?
I don't think so. I don't know. I know I'm stubborn. So that's something I've always known.
Maybe that's a more succinct way to describe it.
Yep, I'm very stubborn in my perspectives.
Okay. So you're stubborn. Okay, so
yeah.
in the context of this conversation tonight, you're stubborn. So in that uniquely Vanessa ability to be stubborn, also be stubborn about how what you're saying is right. Make sure you test what you're stubborn about. It's good to be stubborn, but be stubborn when you're extremely confident that you've tested it, right? Don't be stubborn for its own sake.
Yeah.
When you're stubborn and you miss something that's kind of like, that's obviated in a final review like that, then you're like, oh shit, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
So use the stubbornness as kind of a tool to promote the confidence that your clients want to have in you, but make sure you have the material to back it up. Make sure that you've vetted it and challenged it and taken it apart and put it back together, and know that in whatever scenario it plays out in, the stubbornness is backed up by the test.
Yeah, and I think in that aspect, I didn't really take a step back and reevaluate my plan layouts.
Yeah.
I looked at them and I based them off of my own experiences, but didn't think about how, okay, so maybe having a second bathroom would have been a good idea with having two different types of people living in the same house. It's just not something that even crossed my mind, because it's not something I've come across in my personal experience.
I share the sort of assignment of ownership in that miss, right? I looked at these plans too. We all looked at these plans, and we all, in effect, missed it together. And it just goes to show you how important it is to share the information as it's evolving, because even when you do that, there's still going to be misses. Yeah, I mean, we all own, I think, some part of that misstep in that moment. But I think I think we should have worked harder together to make that omission go away. I think that would have helped a lot. The plan drawings, I thought, were really, really strong, and I thought the idea of combining the plans with the elevations and then doing the separate plate for each of the three unit types was really good. I want to commend you for making those three double plate packages really clear. I thought that was really good. I hadn't seen that until the review, and I felt like that was a perfect way to show the work. I do want to pick a nit with your drawings, though. I feel like, and this is not a technical term, but I feel like the perspectives are a little too Photoshoppy. That's not a word, I know, but like your black ghosty figures are kind of floating in space, and they're just silhouettes, and they're not engaged with
people. I didn't have silhouettes.
I thought you did. Why did I write?
Because I don't like the silhouette people. They bug me.
I don't either. Maybe I'm just remembering it that way. Too Photoshoppy. What am I saying about that?
I mean, I understand what you're saying, because I rendered them and then I Photoshopped them. They looked almost too perfect, too ideal world, taking a step back. There wasn't anything they might have
maybe
unrealistically.
Yeah, they looked a little sweet in that regard, because the sky didn't look like a real sky, and those kinds of things. So maybe
make them less pretty.
Yeah,
next time.
Create a perspective, Vanessa, that is kind of like your plans. Like the plans are just a real simple, beautiful architectural floor plan with a watercolor wash, right? And there are terrific examples of renderings that have that same character, that same watercolor vibe, that same transparent quality. Then they don't look Photoshoppy. So I would maybe try to expand your sort of rendering vocabulary and try to create more alignment between the drawings that you're sort of showing, because that is one thing that seems to be unique to you. That like the aerial perspective plans are one thing, and then you have those beautiful watercolor plans, and then you have those super intense, sweet perspective renderings. And there's like 3 different Vanessas kind of talking at the same time here. So I guess that I would try to unify that in your work.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So Samantha was talking about how big these units are, and units for purchase. We appreciated the thoughtfulness that you made in this discussion about the user groups. The units, these are units for purchase, but how does one evolve? I guess the scenario is, in your mind, that you would buy, like if I'm an A or a B, I would buy an A or a B, but then if I became a C, how does that jump happen? And maybe, maybe the answer in your world for this class might have been they're for rent.
Mm-hmm.
And you make that easy move by moving, right? In this part of the neighborhood or in this kind of unit, and that allows for flexibility, because living in my neighborhood is going to be this wonderful thing, because we've got the park and we've got the cafe, we've got density, and they're affordable, and I designed it, right? So that's why that would happen. But in a for sale, we both may not have thought that through very convincingly. In the for sale thing, in the for sale scenario, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And I think Samantha was hitting at that. And I think that the idea that they were for sale became a self-limiting condition that wasn't flexible. And I think flexibility was an ambition in your work. And I thought that was kind of a good thing that she pointed it out. Can the demographic typologies not be so prescribed? Martin says, why are these bungalows? Old millennials could live here too.
Oh, because he wanted to live there.
Yeah, I thought that was nifty. I thought that was neat, actually. Outside looks like it relates to the outside. That's good.
Sorry if you hear snoring. My dog is snoring really loud.
That sounds familiar. Density. Could these be taller? So maybe if it was a for sale thing, if that's something that you kind of established early on, then you would have learned, if you had maybe explored more bungalows like in Detroit or in Royal Oak or in Ferndale, like if you had started to document those and research those, even talk to Jeremy, who has a bungalow in Ferndale. What does a family of, how many kids does he have now? 5? It's what does a family like that do in a bungalow without needing to move, right? They go up, they build a dormer in the roof, and they find a way to put a stair in, or they refinish the basement. And so what are the ways that the chassis can expand and grow without expanding the footprint? Right, that's one thing. What can they do if they have to expand or double the footprint by going above? So what does that look like in your world, right? In your design. So I think if you were firmly convinced in a for sale product, then you were obliged to sort of think about the question of how are these not self-limiting? How can I expand? And if they expand, what does that do to the neighbor? And what are the boundaries of expansion? Is that part of a setback? What's the optimal setback scenario for each of these pieces on the lawn, right? And that could have been an interesting line of thought. So having some future options might have been interesting. And then the last comment that Jonathan was bringing up, the idea that maybe the one bedroom is smaller, the two-bedroom is bigger and the three-bedroom is biggest. It kind of challenges the sort of assumption that you made that they're all like 900 square feet or whatever that area of the thing was, right? So I thought you got some really good feedback.
I did.
And I thought that the conversation was very engaging. I thought having Jonathan join us right at your critique was really fortunate for you. And you know, I think that, you know, I hope that you got a lot out of that conversation that maybe, you know, you didn't earlier on in like the second review or even in the sort of pinup review. What was your sense of the discussion, Vanessa?
I
have a lot of notes.
Jonathan said the most, I guess, new to me, because I hadn't even thought about it in a way of marketability. I had thought about it from a construction standpoint, same footprint, easier to build, same materials, like from an economic standpoint.
And you talked about that. You replied to him on that. Yeah, I thought that was good. You made a good response on that.
Yeah, I just didn't think about it in the like a marketability standpoint, and so he had a really good point that he brought that up. I also liked the conversation between the purchase and rent, because that's not something I thought about a lot. And I think now that we've discussed it and they discussed it in the review, I think renting would be probably better for the user group I was designing for, and I think that would have been a better decision. So overall, I thought I got really good feedback, and I enjoyed the conversation that came about from my project afterwards.
Good. Well, I'm glad. I enjoyed your project, and I'm glad that you were agreeable, Vanessa, to share with me your epiphany at the one point during the spring break, and that you wanted to meet with me. I thought that was a good strategy on your part, and I was talking to Brandon earlier tonight about that. That I think it's always a good sign when the people that we're working with continue to talk about the work as it's evolving, rather than like covering it and protecting it and keeping it secretive until you put your tuxedo on and you're out there making your presentation and the rabbit's not in the hat anymore because you weren't planning for the rabbit to be there for some reason. So you end up kind of like looking kind of foolish because it's all a surprise, and something obvious that you were missing might have been caught if we had talked about it sooner. So I felt like that's a good thing for you to do that, and I would encourage you to do that more. I mean, I know that you're not going to have more studios, but Vanessa, it's a good way to be in an office. It's a good way to soften your stubbornness, and it's a good way to evolve it so that you have reason to be convinced in what you're doing. And I think that'll serve you very well. And I also think working with Victor for as long as you decide to stay there will serve you very well. Indeed, it's a good firm. They do excellent work, and you'll learn a lot there. And I hope you continue to enjoy it.
I do. I've already learned a ton, and I use them. I kind of throughout the semester bounced my ideas, and we used it at the lunch table and just talking about it. And so it was really helpful working there during the semester, and then talking with you and having all sorts of like perspectives on my project. It was always like I could talk to them, I could talk to you. It was a very interactive semester for me. So being at Soroki so far has been a great experience. So
I'm glad that you're not working where you were. I don't know anything about where you were. I think it was a kitchen showroom, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. It was
a residential remodeler, so I was designing.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be demeaning.
Oh, it's okay.
I just didn't remember it.
Too.
Yeah. So
yeah, that sort of thing. But much better.
It's really good for you. It's an important firm, and you'll get a lot out of it for as long as you're there.
Yeah, I think.
And are you taking Practice Portfolio this summer?
I'm gonna take it in the fall because I'm not done anytime soon. I have 5 classes left, And so I'm still kind of deciding if I want to smush them all in and be done in December or just stretch it out and wait till May. So I'm not
Well,
done
the,
like
the
everybody
beauty
else.
of the Lawrence program, as you know, is you can do it at night, and it doesn't really impact work very much,
Mhm.
right? So I think that's ideal. So
Yeah.
hang in there, stay in touch, say hi to everyone at the office, please, for me.
I will.
All righty. I've enjoyed working with you, Vanessa.
You too. This was a
All
fun
right.
semester. I really like this
I-
project.
I'm glad. I'm glad you learned a lot, and I enjoyed learning from you. Have a good summer.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Hey, Michael, how are you tonight?
Good. Still, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very well, thank you. Let's see. You had a very interesting series of comments and conversations. Did you enjoy the critique? You're very comfortable up there. You strike me as someone who's maybe a little shy and maybe not entirely comfortable in public speaking, but you know what, Michael? You have a very nice speaking voice. There's a little bit of a stammer that actually is something I have, and you know what? It's not a bad thing. It kind of causes people to see you as someone who's really thinking about what they're saying as they're saying it, and there's a quotient of thoughtfulness to the way you're speaking, and I think that should serve you well. And if you put yourself in a situation, Michael, where you're given more opportunity to speak in public, you're gonna grow more comfortable with it. I'm actually painfully shy. I don't like doing this. I'd rather be watching TV with my wife and the dog snoring next to me. Who would want to? I mean, I'm still wearing the same clothes. You're at least in a t-shirt. I'm still wearing what I wore to work. I haven't even had my beer yet, you know?
To be fair, this was what I was wearing.
But it's part of my commitment to get over this shyness was to put myself out there and find a voice that I can speak with that is at least energetic and enthusiastic, and at least has something occasionally interesting to say. But you know that's something that you'll grow into, and I hope that you do that. I hope that you take this observation as a hopeful one, that it's not something to be ashamed of or embarrassed about. It's who you are, it's who I am, and you'll grow into that speaking voice. And because it's a very nice voice, and I think when you were talking, you said a lot of very provocative things, and I think that you said them very clearly, and I think that ended up making, Michael, for you a very good conversation.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I definitely am a shy person. You saying a little shy was a compliment.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah,
I think it is.
Yeah.
It could come from being someone from a small town. You're right. I mean, that's probably there. Okay, so I think the elephant in the room for me are the renderings. They were all very deeply atmospheric. They were very, very dark, and they were very warm, and because of the atmosphere in them, they might have been a little disarming or unsettling. I mean, there is no better time of day, I think, than that twilight moment, like at dawn and at sunset, when the sky is both light and dark, when buildings are both illuminated and in terms of their surface, and illuminating in terms of the light coming from them. But what happens is, if you don't dial in that moment exactly in a drawing, it can tip one way or the other. And I think all of your perspectives had that kind of consistent moment described in them. And I might have, if I had known that you were going to do that, or if I had seen them earlier, I might have said, okay, Hard Charger, let's maybe do this one as that rendering at that time of day. But let's do a 11 a.m. morning rendering, or let's do a rendering with the leaves falling, or let's do a rendering in a snowfall. If you're so interested in portraying these simple residential themes in a residential neighborhood, you know, taking the mundane and making it a little more special and making it less mundane, let's show it in typical and mundane weather conditions. And that might have been an interesting way to set up that tensional element between the mundane and the temporal, rather than just picking on the same temporal moment, the same time of day to show the same thing, because we ended up not discerning anything new about the thing, the subject, because of the way they were described. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, it does.
I want to talk a little bit now about the elevations of the market and of the homes. They were sensational.
Oh.
I hope that if you God, I hope that when you were drawing those, you kind of went, shit, these are really nice. These are taut in proportion. They are clean. These are nice. Did that bell go off in your head? Do you know what I'm saying?
I can't honestly say that. I just kept thinking, what can I do to make these look better? What can I do to make these better?
Stop being so fucking honest. No, I'm hopeful that maybe tonight you'll go back to those and go, what was he getting at? Why are these so good? I'm serious. Those were really quite lovely, and I think that regardless of these things maybe being too big for this neighborhood or too big for this program or illegal because they cross the street, all of those things said, which I think we should like yell at you for making them still too big. But and we did on Saturday. But like, look at those elevations; they're really quite special, and they are beautifully proportioned things. And I want to commend you on that, particularly the north-south elevation. No, the west elevations and the east elevations. The west elevations are beautiful. So go back and look at those and take stock of that. And maybe the other comment, you know, when I observed early on, I think it was probably at Benchmark 2 that these were way too big. When you hear things like that, like you should go, what's he talking about? Big compared to what? Look, he's 5'3" and I'm 6'3". So what does he know about big? Or maybe what do I know about big, right? So you should say like, okay, I'm going to take the house next door and I'm going to put that floor plan on my house, right? And then you would say, oh, well, see, this is no bigger than what's there. Mm-hmm. And then you would have won the argument, right? So you let the context influence the form by comparing context to form. That would be one way to test and validate. So this is ammunition I'm giving you for next time, right? For your work as an architect. If someone says it's too big, and it might be a contractor, it might be Showstack that says these are too big. That's what Steve told me the other day. These townhomes are too big, Mark. I can't sell these townhomes. They're 1,400 square feet. I need to be making, and he started doing the numbers and it said, I need to be making $340,000 a year to rent these. Who's going to buy these, right? No one can live in this. It's like, you know, he plays it out. So, okay, so then I say, I don't say this to Steve, but then I would say, if I were you, okay, Farlow, I'm going to cut these in half. I'm going to like reduce them on the photocopier by 50%, the area. I'm going to keep the stairway 4 feet. I'm going to draw the kitchen with 2-foot counters, right? Mm-hmm. But everything else is going to grow by a 50% reduction, and then you can put that conversation to bed. So when you heard that a couple of times and you didn't do anything about it, I would challenge you next time to not be so shy and say, right? And say, okay, I'm going to respond to your remark with my small town ways and my quiet, gentle, shy way, and I'm going to say, you know, I listened to what you said, and I was really intrigued with it. So I looked at the house next door and drew it, and I mapped it on to my house, and this is what I discovered. And then I reduced my house by 50% just because that seemed like a nice number, and it's clearly too small. So maybe there's something in between, right? And then that would have been an interesting conversation because it would show that you were interested in the feedback you were getting, but also willing to explore the possibility that someone in the room might actually be right, but that you weren't going to take it at stock value unless you tested it. And I think that would be a good way for you to begin like comporting yourself and being engaged in the process for what it's worth. Because a lot of people come to the table with a lot to offer, and we're not always right. So I like it when you guys are skeptical, and I like it when you're cautious with your professors and your colleagues. But you should try to listen to what someone is saying in terms of maybe the alarm going off. Maybe we're not saying it very clearly, but maybe just say, I heard you say that these are too big. I wasn't sure what you meant, so I just compared it. Is it just too big in footprint? Is that what you're saying? Or is it just too much square footage? Or are the rooms too big but the footprint's okay? It would help. It would help the process move along, and then you might find that what we were saying was that the windows were too big or the building's too tall. We weren't like being very clear about what we were being critical of, and it engages the outcome. It engages the process so the outcome is a little bit more relational to the discussion, and I think that might help you a lot. There was a remark that I thought was really interesting. The public building looks like a private building. Is this a good thing or is this a misunderstanding? I thought that was a very interesting thing. I'm intrigued that everything kinda was residential. I can see where that could be a very like appropriate notion. I don't know what you thought about that. I don't know if you heard about that.
Oh, I did.
Before. But I did like that your work ended up there.
Okay. Yeah, that comment and the size comment haunted me these past couple of days, and I kept thinking, what could I have done? Of course, when I had divided the square footage is divided again, like you said.
Yeah.
Then I was thinking, well, I should have probably done a different material on the market to distinguish them. Yeah, not just brick.
Right.
Replace the brick with something.
I mean, I think everybody said that your work really came a long way. I talked to Christoph this morning.
Yeah.
He was very impressed with your journey, and he was really taken by your work. I think that was hopefully something that he was able to convey to you in his comments.
Both him and starts with a B, right?
Well, Ryan, Sammy, and Betsy, and then Jonathan.
Yeah,
and then Christoph.
Christoph and Betsy both commented about how they liked what I developed past midterm, and I appreciated them saying that.
Good, I'm glad you did.
Similarly to my other colleagues, I think having them come back and even having the Sammy and the others who haven't seen it before, that's a good. And ironically, they each sat on different sides of the table, but it's good to have both, I think, in the final round. And I appreciate it.
I think the last thing I'd say is that and I own this maybe misstep as much as you do. There was a comment that says, how is the fireplace the hearth, and the core of the house? Why isn't the kitchen and the living room and the fireplace all in one space. Why is the fireplace hidden and adjacent to the stairs? That was sort of the gist of that thread of thought, and I know that we talked about that. And we did together one night when I said, wait a minute, so the living room is this sort of narrow, long thing where the fire, and when people were talking about how I'm going to get really warm sitting on this couch in front of the firebox. I thought that was a kind of an interesting remark. Like in this house of largesse, right, where everything is so big, like the couch is slammed right up against the firebox, and I thought that was like an interesting moment. Yeah. So I mean, we talked about like that room and how that room was being used, and I agreed with like the room's size. I agreed with the compression of that space and how that was not necessarily a space that everyone was going to be in all the time. It was a special space, and the fireplace was an aspect of it. But I of all people, I lived in a Frank Lloyd Wright house. I lived in Affleck house.
Yeah, cramped.
I know about like Usonian architecture. I know about Wright's earliest work. I know about his writings, and I should have said, "Oh, dude, you need to look at the Cheney house, right? You need to look at one of those small Wright houses, or you need to look at like the Getch Winkler house in Lansing, where the fireplace and the kitchen and the living room are kind of like all one thing, right? And where, or like in Falling Water, which ain't big at all, where the fireplace is also where they cook the soup, and you eat right next to the fireplace, and the living room is also right there. Like there's like a synergy by all of these things being open and available together. But in the case of your plan, they were all on this sort of spiral or pinwheel that wrapped around the fireplace, including the way we circulated up. So we probably together should have like gone through that more carefully. Like I should have pressed you to say, okay, who are you assuming that's doing the chopping and the cooking, right? Who's doing the cleaning and the baking? And who's getting served and who's serving? And who's sitting in this chair here and then? And who's making the fire, and where does the firewood go? And how does all of this get used? If we had thought about that a little bit more, if we had enacted and reenacted those human scenarios, we might have found a better way to organize those things to sort of miss that conversation.
Yeah.
And so lesson learned, I guess. I should have spoken up about that a little bit sooner, because if there's anybody in your world that you've met that can say that they lived in Affleck house, it was me, and I should have said something. But but I also kind of need you to own that role as an architect of enacting and reenacting how a user engages with the building, right? Because I think that'll cause you to be like in conversation, even if you're talking to yourself, like in conversation with how people use these buildings. Because I feel like that's kind of like maybe the root of why things got so big, not really thinking about how long people were going to have to walk down the hall to use the restroom. How big was that hall? Who's going to clean that hallway? What's the sound like in that hallway when there's people downstairs talking? All of that stuff. And so thinking through the design from the sort of the user's role, I think, would have been very good. Not just thinking about shrinking in terms of size, but just in terms of usability, right? That might have helped.
Yeah.
I also like how you this semester stuck with your guns on the Glenn Murcutt piece, and I like how your work was in the manner of Glenn Murcutt. I appreciated that you weren't necessarily embarrassed or ashamed, or even like that your work had the silhouette of his and the trusses like his. I mean, I really love that, Michael. I think that was really good. So
I don't think Yeah, I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of. He's a great
Absolutely.
designer.
Yeah, well, if you're gonna, yeah, I mean, you could have like modeled your work after me, but you chose to run with it, so that was a good choice, right? So I mean, that was good, and so, but you took his work to another level, and I think that was kind of what I was trying to talk about from the very beginning of the studio, and so hats off to you for that.
Good.
I mean, I just wrote down a lot of things as you were talking. I didn't really like say this was good or this was bad. But when the comments got more in a dialogue with your presentation, that's what I did write down more. And I think we've talked about all of those points.
You know, the one thing that I wrote down about, I mean, from the conversation was, my thoughts are that I probably just didn't provide the slide that demonstrated why we agreed that they didn't understand why I designed a second type housing, unit type C, I call it. And I think it's because I didn't really like pause at like the site plan and show the 2.5 story storage building right there.
Yep.
So
Yep.
And I think if I explained that more, I mean, I still got ducked, so it's not like I didn't fill the whole space. But if I did explain that more, I don't think they would have been as critical.
It wouldn't have been an issue.
Yeah.
I agree.
So that's the only other note. I mean, I have basically all the same notes that you covered too.
Good.
Too big and fireplace. Oh, and I mean, I think it might just be a personal thing, but they said this to Jamie, I think, or maybe Catherine, where they said I should have just went with a flat roof instead of a gable.
Martin said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with that note or that discussion. Personally, I live in Michigan. I've lived in the Affleck house. Did I mention that? And I have to double the roof. You know, that's not something I think people should have to do, right? They shouldn't be in a position as a homeowner to climb up on a roof, on an icy roof, with an icy ladder to shovel it and fall off and kill themselves.
Yeah.
You know, the house should be serving you. You shouldn't have to serve the house. So, and I think if you design in Michigan, that becomes problematic for residential architecture.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I agree with Martin. I agree with Martin on a lot of things, but I don't think I agree with him on that. Well, I've enjoyed having you in the studio, Michael, and I hope you've enjoyed this journey as well. I wonder if you can tell me how long you're going to be in school and how long you're going to be at Showstack.
I just need to wrap up the practice portfolio, and I will be done.
Congratulations.
That's the only class I have to do, I'll be at Showstack hopefully not much longer. I am going to start to send out my portfolio and resume to firms around, and they already, my team there already knows that I'm going to start looking here once I'm finished with my final exams.
What are you doing at Showstack? How do you help them?
I am their CAD operator is my official title. So if there's any plans that they have that they need either tweaked, or I also draw up survey plans that I survey a space and I'll draw it up myself too. So from scratch. And I also do Photoshop work for them for graphics work and stuff like that. So, but nothing that I.
Well, you're around. I'm around this summer. If you want to sit down and talk about the resume and the portfolio after you finish it up, and you sort of tell me a little bit more about the kind of work you want to begin doing in an architecture office, I'm agreeable to help you on that.
I'll probably take you up on that. Thank you.
All right, and I'll buy that first cup of coffee.
Okay.
Good luck finishing up this summer. You have a great time.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. I've enjoyed having you. Hey, Justin, how are you?
Hi, Mark. Good. How are you?
I'm great tonight. How about yourself? Did you enjoy it on Saturday?
Yeah, yeah. It was good. It was really cool to see everyone's final product. Like
Yeah, I agree.
everyone really went a long way. So I was pretty happy to see the progress. Definitely.
Yeah. Did you enjoy the conversation that you got?
Yeah, yeah. They were pretty good. I think I was nervous for some reason. I think I was first, and I was just really nervous for some reason, and it was so hard for me to find all these words. And I don't know. I don't know what happened, but I thought I was nervous.
I could sense that, but you didn't it wasn't really obvious. So
Okay.
hang in there. It wasn't it didn't damn you, it didn't
All
screw
right.
you up.
Well, that's good, because that was bugging me the whole day. I was like, man, I was so nervous. I don't know what happened, and I practiced a lot, and I was like, I don't know what happened, but I think the conversations were pretty good though.
Yeah, I think the conversations may have calmed you down. Maybe just sort of showing your work and going through it.
Definitely.
That helped. In some ways, going through all those sort of early slides of your research as often as you have this semester, that kind of maybe got you into the groove. Like, I know this stuff now. I can relax and take
You'd think, and then when the big day comes, and
right,
yeah.
and then you start talking through it, and I thought that was maybe had a calming effect on you. So I felt like there was when you were reading your narrative, the very first slide was an aerial money shot, and you went right into the Vanguard thing, and you should have left that up a little bit. You should have left that first plate up a little bit longer so that we could have taken it in, because it was a nice drawing.
Gotcha.
Okay. But all of your perspectives were kind of all aerials.
Yeah.
Like the alley shot. So that bugs the crap out of me. If I had known that you were going to do those, I would have yelled at you sooner. So here's what I mean by that. I had this conversation. Gosh, I hope it wasn't with you, but I had this conversation maybe with Jamie. I think there's a role for the aerial perspective in a presentation, and maybe there's one moment where it's there, right? You have it. But I think when you're showing architecture in context, you are obliged to consider how we can make the subject, which is the architecture, and the context around it, engage the viewer. And it seems to me that the most effective way to do that is set the drawing so that the horizon line is at your eyes, at my eyes, not a bird's eye. Because the roof becomes a foreground subject. It becomes a subject, right? And every aerial is, aside from maybe one or two, was a roof plan, right? It showed the roof, and I'm like, whoa, why is this roof so important? Because that's, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If the roof's not important, let's not show the roof, right? Right? And but more importantly, get us into the space. Get the viewer engaged with the subject, and get the foreground active with other viewers walking by, driving by, biking by the subject, which is the building. Create a foreground, a middle ground, and a background, always in your perspectives, just like that poster on your wall behind you, right? Yeah, there.
Yeah.
That's really important because it ends up becoming a series of drawings that show the object and how much more detail and how much more information we can talk about the object, rather than showing the subject of architecture in space, in time, in context. So I think some of your drawings, some of your final rendering drawings missed that point. I love the remark that Betsy made. You can tell that Justin loves architecture. I thought that was a really nice compliment.
Yeah,
And
that was pretty nice.
it shows something about who you are as a designer. It shows kind of a respect for what you do, that it's a craft, and that architecture can be fun, and it can be, rigorous and meticulous, but it can also be flexible and casual and accidental, right?
Hmm.
And your
Hmm.
work was kind of a blend of both of those things, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm so delighted that she kind of noticed that about you, and I think that's kind of a good quality that describes you, and I would try to refine that ambivalence, right? I would
Hmm.
refine that in your work. I think that will help you.
Right.
Um, I think also some other remarks that I thought were really good is, how are the materials part of the neighborhood? I mean,
Hmm.
brick is part of the neighborhood.
Hmm.
Well, really? Is that, so show us how it is, right? Show
Hmm.
us where there is brick,
Hmm.
and why brick is chosen, and what kind of brick. It could have been a point of departure, especially since brick was so prevalent in the architecture on the first floor,
Hmm.
which you ended up getting kind of criticized for,
Hmm.
because on the perspectives that were at eye level, it
Hmm.
showed kind of like a chilly kind of experience, right?
Hmm.
All brick, no windows
Hmm.
in that corridor space, right?
Yeah.
So if brick is so important, if it is such an important contextual response, show us why and how, and show us how you deploy it so that it's a fresh interpretation of the context, a fresh interpretation of that material.
Hmm. Right.
The building got a lot more interesting over the past 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh yeah.
Um, Christoph wondered if introducing brick at the first floor was appropriate. The alley seems dark and it's not transparent enough. Maybe a harder look at those first floor windows and doors. He felt, I think, that it was just a bit heavy-handed. So
Hmm.
doing kind of like larger, more unusual or even situational window approaches at some of those first floor spaces, particularly in that outdoor courtyard pathway, would have
Hmm.
been interesting. And all you had to do, really, I think, Justin, is look back at like the Bergamot Artist Lofts or Shoreham to see how they treated the
Hmm.
existing things, or how they treated the new things, to begin, work from your precedents to
Hmm.
help you understand what could happen and how that could be stronger or better. But
Right.
I think they felt like it was a really good and interesting building. Um, in spite of the building kind of like hovering over the garden, I think they felt like it was cut off.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, a couple of people felt like the small stair in the urban garden was a bit awkward. I
Hmm.
didn't feel that way. I kind of liked the tension that created, but I
Hmm.
think the market space wasn't really clear. It was kind of inadvertent.
Right.
And if maybe you had drawn a couple of like pickup trucks there with a like a pop-up table on like sawhorses, and someone standing in front of corn, you
Hmm.
know, on one of those tables, and the pickup truck behind them, like dimensionally, what does that look like in
Hmm.
plan? And is that like leftover patio area near that stairway adequate for that? How does
Hmm.
all of that work on a Saturday? Showing us it enacted out would have
Hmm.
helped you, would have like put that whole question to bed.
Right.
And you
Yeah.
might have looked at it and said, "Oh, dude, I need more room here.
Hmm.
So how can I make the stair smaller, or how can I make the landscape and the hardscape out in front of here bigger, so that
Hmm.
I can have at least like 6 pickup trucks here,"
Right.
or something like that, right? Like
Hmm.
documenting that. I think you
Hmm.
documented really well how the people live out their lives in the building. The plans, I think, were really taught. I think you had to work hard to get them to that
Hmm.
point. But you showed, I think, reasonable spaces, reasonable uses, reasonable areas. But I think like the whole site was kind of like, kind of, you just like dealt with what you thought you had to deal with, but you didn't like tell a more convincing story.
Hmm.
Does
Yeah.
that, does that make sense?
Yeah. I got it. Yeah. I agree.
Really strong connections between inside and outside. The east wall could be more kinetic and active. The east wall in the courtyard of the new building, the west building. That was an interesting comment. I like that. Maybe like guillotine doors or overhead sectional doors.
Yeah.
Or barn doors. That we're talking about like urban farming, but like. But like the barn could have been like a case study. I should have thought of that myself, right? How could maybe it doesn't have to be a red wood building that looks like a barn, but maybe it could have like lofts. Maybe it could have sliding doors like a barn does, and that you evoke that precedent in a kind of a new, maybe fresh way.
Yeah, that was a really good comment.
Yeah, I thought so too. And the idea then that could have strengthened the connection between inside and outside. Because when the barn doors open, then the outside spills into the inside, and the reverse happens, and it makes that connection. And then the courtyard becomes actually bigger, right?
Exactly.
Socially bigger, programmatically bigger. Resist the temptation to make objects. I thought that was an interesting comment. That had to do with like everything you did, but like Betsy was saying, even if you just show a very light picture of Google Earth of the whole neighborhood, and then you drop your plans on top of it, at least that context is always in play.
That's one thing.
That's another thing you should do. Maybe that's something you redo that drawing for before the summer.
Yeah.
It helps ground your work, I wrote. And I think maybe, you noticed a big glaring error with the elevator missing on that top floor. I think you might need to add a second stair up there. I think that's the other big thing that I noticed, that you actually need 2 means of egress. Even though you only have 4 apartments, actually you should check that.
Okay.
I think regardless, you need 2 means of egress from all residential typologies on that 3rd floor, and I didn't catch that until I saw that plan more carefully last Saturday. But that stair could go from the roof down the side of the building. You don't have to extend the middle stair to the roof plan, although you could.
Right.
But it could be kind of like an outdoor fire escape stair that makes its way out. I can't believe I didn't catch that sooner. I also can't believe that Martin, who looks for that, he sits there and he counts them in those reviews. I can't believe that he didn't say anything about it. But I noticed that you only have 4 apartments up there. I think that's what I noticed. So you may want to just double back on that and just make sure.
Okay. Sounds good.
So I think that's all I got for you.
Sounds good. Well, it was a good semester.
Did you read the comments from everyone?
I think I only got 1. Is that right?
No, you got a PDF with pages from Ryan. He's RM. Sammy Soshelski, she's SS, and Christoph Eibold, he's CI.
I looked at it from my phone at work, and so I only saw the first page. So.
And you didn't scroll through it.
No, I don't know if I guess I only downloaded the first page on my phone. Yep. Well, I'll definitely look through them.
Computer, dude, and then read it. Go ahead. Let me know if you have any comments about it. I enjoyed having you in the studio. I also appreciated how your approach this semester was a building, right? One big building, kind of like a dormitory, a community-centered dormitory, working with an existing building, trying to integrate an existing building and spreading the wings of the site to engage a much larger footprint than that, but at the same time trying to privilege open space. Those are all themes that I'm very interested in, and I'm delighted that you tried to do that. And
it was quite a challenge.
Right. Yeah, and it is, and it was a mixed-use building, by all accounts, and that's also what I'm interested in. And until this academic year of 2015 and 16, that's what I taught my studio on, mixed-use hybrid buildings, and you would have enjoyed that last year. So I'm glad that you tried to sort of do that, even though that wasn't a stated condition or objective in my studio. But I'm glad that you did that.
Right.
Kind of made me homesick for those old classes.
Probably. Right.
So what are you going to do this summer, Justin?
Practice portfolio.
And then are you all done?
Yeah, I'm walking next week.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
I'm glad for you.
Yeah, so,
and you're planning on staying at FSP?
Yeah, at least for a while. I mean,
okay, good.
I've only been there for a few months, but I'm
liking there for at least a year.
Right, I'm liking it.
Yeah, you'll learn a lot.
I'm liking it right now. Yeah, I have been actually. So
good.
You know, just like diving into the code stuff that I haven't really done in the past, and
all stuff that I get a charge out of. That's cool.
Right, working really closely with my project manager and learning.
Fabulous.
Yeah. So it's really good.
You'll learn a lot there, and it's housing, which is very important, and you know, and you're doing stuff in the city of Detroit, and you're delivering a product for the city that the city needs, which is housing. So kudos to you for doing that, and hope to run into you. Have fun at graduation, and hats off to you for a good semester.
Thanks for an amazing class. It was a really good experience.
Good. I'm glad I had one too.
A really very a valuable class for sure. But
well, thanks. Spread the good word, okay?
All right, will do, definitely.
Dustin, have a great summer. Talk to you soon.
Right. You too. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.